Story 1. The Mirror Convoy. The 18-wheeler behind me had my exact license plate number, and when I checked my mirrors again, the driver looked exactly like me. I first noticed it at the 247-mile marker on I-80 through Nebraska. That endless stretch where the highway hypnotizes you into thinking every truck is the same truck, every mile is the same mile. But this wasn't highway hypnosis. I'd been running loads for 16 years, knew the difference between road fatigue and something genuinely wrong. The truck maintaining position 3 lengths back was a Kenworth W900, same faded red as mine, same dent in the driver's side door from that loading dock in Memphis, same mud flaps with the chrome girl silhouette. When I changed lanes to test it, the truck behind me changed lanes. When I accelerated, it accelerated. When I hit my Jake brake coming down the grade near North Platte, I heard its Jake brake echo mine exactly. That distinctive engine compression growl that becomes part of your heartbeat after enough years. My name is Marcus Chen, and I'd been hauling refrigerated goods across the Midwest for Wallace Transport since 2007. I knew these roads like some men know their wives, every curve, every truck stop, every mile marker where the cell signal drops. The load in my reefer unit was standard, pharmaceutical supplies from Omaha to Sacramento, time-sensitive but nothing unusual. Temperature set to 38 degrees, all seals intact, manifest checked and double-checked. Everything by the book. But the book didn't cover what to do when your own truck starts following you. I grabbed my CB radio, keyed the mic. Breaker 19. This is Red Dragon eastbound at marker 247. Anybody got eyes on the Kenworth 3 back from my position? Static, then a gravelly voice, probably a veteran hauler from the sound of it. Red Dragon, this is Grizzly Adams. I got nothing behind you, partner. You're the last truck in this stretch for at least 2 miles. I checked my mirrors again. The truck was still there, close enough now that I could see the driver's face in his windshield. Close enough to see that the driver had my face, my exact face, down to the scar over my left eyebrow from a bar fight in Reno years ago. He was even wearing my favorite flannel shirt, the green and black one my daughter gave me for Christmas. The CB crackled again. My own voice came through the speaker. Breaker 19. This is Red Dragon eastbound at marker 247. Anybody got eyes on the Kenworth 3 back from my position? Word for word what I'd just said. Same inflection, same pause before Kenworth. I slammed the CB back on its mount, focused on the road, told myself this was exhaustion, told myself I'd been pushing too hard, too many hours without proper rest. But my logbook was clean. I'd had my full 10 hours off at the Flying J in Council Bluffs, had a decent meal, even called my daughter to tell her I'd be home by Thursday. The truck behind me honked. Not a friendly trucker greeting, but my exact horn, the specific pattern I always used. 2 short, 1 long. Our family code, the one I'd taught my daughter to listen for when I'd pull into the driveway late at night. 2 short, 1 long. Daddy's home. Nobody knew that pattern but us. The highway ahead stretched empty and silver in the afternoon sun, heat shimmer rising off the asphalt in waves. The mirror truck maintained its position, perfect distance, perfect speed. I pushed the accelerator harder, watched my speedometer climb to 75, then 80. The Kenworth behind me accelerated exactly in sync, never gaining, never falling back. My CB crackled to life again, but this time the voice was different, younger, feminine, urgent. Daddy, why are there 2 of you? My daughter's voice, Katie's voice, but she was home in Sacramento, 1,400 miles west. Daddy, which one is real? Which one is coming home? I grabbed the CB, hands shaking now. Katie, baby, where are you? How are you on this channel? The response came immediately, still her voice, but wrong somehow, like a recording played backward and then forward again. Daddy, he knows the horn pattern, he knows the Christmas shirt, he knows the scar. Which one is the real you? I looked in my side mirror and the driver behind me was waving. The same wave I gave to other truckers, that casual two-finger lift off the steering wheel. He was smiling, the exact smile I practiced in the mirror every morning while shaving, trying to look less tired, less worn down by the endless miles. The sun caught his windshield at an angle, and for a moment I couldn't see him at all. Just a bright reflection of sky and clouds and road. When the glare shifted, he was closer somehow, even though the distance between our trucks hadn't changed. Close enough that I could see his lips moving, mouthing words I couldn't hear but somehow understood. "I'm home now. You're the copy." The highway ahead began to change. The mile markers started running backward, 246, 245, 244, even though I was heading east. The sun, which had been on my right side, began sliding across the sky to my left, reversing its arc. Other trucks appeared on the highway now, all of them Kenworths, all of them faded red, all of them with drivers who looked exactly like me. They filled the lanes beside me, behind me, ahead of me, a convoy of myself stretching to the horizon in both directions. Every single driver wore the green and black flannel shirt. Every single driver had the scar over their left eyebrow. Every single driver turned to look at me at exactly the same moment with exactly the same expression, pity mixed with something hungry. My CB exploded with noise, dozens of voices all talking at once, but every voice was mine. Marker 247, anybody got eyes? Red Dragon eastbound. Which one is real? Daddy's home. 2 short, 1 long. The voices overlapped and echoed, creating a chorus of myself, all slightly out of sync, like standing in a canyon and hearing your own voice come back to you from 1,000 different angles. I reached to turn off the CB, but my hand stopped halfway because I realized the voices weren't coming from the radio anymore. They were coming from outside the truck, from the other drivers, from all around me. The temperature gauge on my dashboard started spinning, the needle whirling counterclockwise, faster and faster. My reefer unit alarm began shrieking, temperature critical, temperature critical. But when I checked the digital readout, it showed 38 degrees exactly, right where it should be. The alarm kept screaming anyway, that piercing beep that meant thousands of dollars of cargo going bad, meant a failed delivery, meant explanations to dispatch I couldn't possibly give. Through the windshield, the sky began to darken, even though it was only 3 in the afternoon, stars appearing in broad daylight, constellations I didn't recognize forming patterns that hurt to look at directly. The truck directly beside me in the passing lane matched my speed perfectly. The driver, another me, held up a piece of paper against his window. Written in my handwriting, my exact handwriting down to the way I loop my lowercase g's, was a message. "You left the road at marker 247. You've been following yourself ever since. We all did. We all are." I swerved hard right toward the shoulder, trying to break away from the convoy, but my steering wheel moved through empty resistance, like steering through water. The truck didn't change course. None of them changed course. We all stayed locked in perfect formation, heading east on a highway that now looked less like asphalt and more like a dark mirror reflecting nothing but trucks and drivers who used to be one person, but were now becoming infinite. My phone rang. Katie's ringtone, the one she'd programmed herself. 2 short rings, 1 long, matching our horn pattern. I grabbed it with shaking hands, saw my own number on the caller ID. When I answered, my voice came through. "Marcus, this is Marcus Chen. I'm about 40 miles ahead of you on I-80. Listen carefully. Don't look in your mirrors anymore. Every time you look, there's more of us. I looked too many times. Now there's hundreds of me. Maybe thousands. I can't see the road anymore, just trucks, just us, just..." The line went dead. I looked anyway. I had to look. The mirrors showed an unbroken line of red Kenworths stretching back to the horizon, so many that they blurred together into a single red river of metal and chrome. And they were all closing in, The distance shrinking, inches becoming feet, becoming miles in reverse. The closest truck was now just one length back. I could see the driver perfectly. He looked exactly like me, but something was wrong with his face. It was my face, but it didn't move quite right, like a mask that didn't fit properly, or like skin that had been borrowed from someone else and worn by something that didn't quite understand how human expressions worked. The CB came to life one final time, and this voice was different from all the others. Older, exhausted, desperate. Marcus Chen, this is Marcus Chen. I've been driving this stretch for 37 years. You're about to learn that I-80 doesn't end, it loops. We loop, all of us, every version that ever got on at marker 247. We're all still here, following ourselves, becoming ourselves, losing ourselves. In about 5 miles, you'll see yourself ahead for the first time. That's when you'll know you've joined the convoy for good. That's when you'll understand that some highways don't take you anywhere. They just take you. The mile marker ahead read 247, the same marker where this started. But I was heading east, had been heading east the entire time, should have been well past it by now. Should have been approaching the Wyoming border. Instead, I was back at the beginning, completing a circle I hadn't known I was driving. And up ahead, barely visible through the growing darkness, I could see a red Kenworth. Driver staring in his mirrors with an expression of dawning horror that I recognized because I was wearing the same expression right now. I was behind myself now, following myself, becoming another truck in the convoy that had no end and no beginning. Just an endless loop of Marcus Chen driving I-80 through Nebraska, forever trying to deliver a load that would never be delivered, forever 3 lengths behind himself, forever checking the mirrors to see himself checking the mirrors to see himself checking the mirrors. My daughter's voice came through the CB one last time, but older now. Tired. Daddy, you never came home. It's Thursday, then Friday, then Thursday again. The house is full of your voices, all asking which one is real. I don't know anymore. I think I stopped knowing years ago. I reached for the CB to respond, but my hand stopped. Because the driver ahead of me, the me I was following, reached for his CB at exactly the same moment, the same motion, the same desperate need to explain. We were synchronized now, perfectly matched, no longer driver and reflection, but 2 points on a circle that had no start and no finish. The convoy continued east through Nebraska. Past marker 247 again and again and again, an infinite loop of red Kenworths with identical drivers wearing identical shirts bearing identical scars. All of us following ourselves through the mirror. All of us becoming copies of copies of copies until the original was lost somewhere in the endless repetition. And none of us would ever deliver our loads or go home or hear our daughters say, "Daddy's home," in response to 2 short honks and 1 long. The highway stretched ahead forever, and behind me forever. And I was both the hunter and the hunted, the driver and the driven, the real Marcus Chen, and just another reflection in the infinite mirror convoy that had no exit and no end. Just mile marker 247 appearing again and again like a promise that could never be kept or a curse that could never be broken. Story 2. The breathing cargo. The reefer unit was breathing, and when I opened the trailer doors at the rest stop, all 30 pallets of beef were arranged to spell a message in frozen meat. Don't stop until sunrise. My name is Ray Kowalski, and I'd been driving temperature-controlled freight for 19 years without incident. This run should have been straightforward. Commercial beef from a meatpacking plant in Dodge City, Kansas, to a distribution center in Tulsa, Oklahoma. 400 miles, easy overnight haul, good money for a simple job. I picked up the load at 11 p.m., checked the seals, verified the manifest, set the reefer to 32 degrees like always. The pallets were shrink-wrapped tight, arranged in standard 6x5 configuration, everything strapped and secured. The loading dock supervisor, a heavy-set guy named Ernesto, had seemed nervous when he sealed the doors. kept glancing back at the trailer like he expected something to follow him out. When I asked if there was a problem, he just shook his head and said, "Make sure you drive straight through. Don't stop. Not for nothing." I laughed it off. Superstitious dock workers weren't uncommon. Overnight shifts in meat processing plants did things to people's heads, made them jumpy, made them see shadows that weren't there. I'd hauled thousands of loads of refrigerated meat over the years. Dead cattle didn't care if you stopped or not. But 20 minutes onto Highway 54, I heard the sound. At first I thought it was just the normal operation of the reefer unit, that rhythmic thrum of the refrigeration compressor cycling on and off. But this was different. This had a pattern, in, out, like breathing, like something massive and slow drawing air into lungs that shouldn't exist. I turned off the radio to listen closer. The breathing continued, steady and deep, coming from the trailer behind me. I could feel it through the seat, a gentle pulsing vibration that matched the rhythm of the sound. In, out, in, out. My first thought was mechanical failure, maybe a belt slipping, creating an unusual pattern. But reefer units don't breathe. They hum or rattle or whine when they fail. They don't take slow, measured breaths like a sleeping giant. I checked my trailer temperature monitor, still 32 degrees. System functioning normally. Except for the breathing. The CB radio crackled to life even though I hadn't keyed the mic. A woman's voice, high and strained, speaking fast. "Southbound hauler, you need to listen carefully. I drove that same load last month, made it 40 miles before I stopped to check the cargo. Don't make my mistake. Don't stop. Don't open the doors. Don't..." The transmission cut off in a burst of static, then silence. I grabbed the mic. "Breaker 19, this is Polar Bear on Highway 54 southbound. Who was that transmission from?" No response. Just the empty hiss of the CB, and behind it, underneath it, the sound of breathing from my trailer, slightly faster now. In, out, in, out, in, out. The first rest stop appeared at the 70-mile marker, one of those small, state-maintained areas with picnic tables and vending machines and a single flickering streetlight. I wasn't planning to stop, but my bladder disagreed, protesting the large coffee I'd had at the truck stop in Dodge City. I pulled into the rest area, left the engine running, kept the reefer unit going. The breathing sound was louder now that I wasn't moving, loud enough that I could hear it clearly over the idle of my engine. In, out, in, out. Deep and wet like breathing through fluid. I climbed out of the cab, telling myself I'd be quick, just a bathroom break, 2 minutes maximum. That's when I heard the voice. Not from the CB, not from outside, but from inside the trailer. A low moan, almost subsonic, vibrating through the metal walls. Words I couldn't quite make out, syllables that didn't fit together right. I walked to the back of the trailer, put my hand on the cold metal doors. The breathing stopped. Complete silence. I stood there in the flickering streetlight, hand on the door seal, knowing I should get back in the cab and drive, knowing I should follow Ernesto's advice and that panicked woman's warning. But 19 years of professional driving meant you checked your cargo when something felt wrong. 19 years of experience said no load should make sounds, should breathe, should feel alive under your hand. I broke the seal. The sound it made was sharp and final. That crack of plastic that meant you'd officially assumed responsibility for whatever came next. I opened the first door, then the second, pulling them wide. The reefer unit fan kicked on, blowing cold air into the warm Kansas night. I expected to see the normal configuration of pallets, shrink-wrapped beef in standardized packaging, organized and inert. Instead, the pallets had been rearranged. The beef packages were still there, still frozen solid, but they'd been unstacked and repositioned into careful patterns on the trailer floor. Letters, words, a message spelled out in frozen meat, 10 feet tall, impossible to miss. Don't stop until sunrise. I stood there staring, trying to process what I was seeing, trying to find the rational explanation. Pallets don't rearrange themselves. Frozen beef doesn't spell warnings. But the evidence was there, undeniable, lit by the faint interior light of the trailer. The packages were arranged too precisely to be random, too deliberate to be an accident. Someone or something had taken the time to create this message while I was driving, while the trailer was sealed, while nothing living should have been inside except dead cattle. The breathing started again, but now I could locate the source. It was coming from the front of the trailer, from the space behind the pallets, from the shadows where the reefer unit light didn't reach. Something was back there, something large enough to rearrange 30 pallets of frozen beef, something that breathed, in, out, in, out. Faster now, excited, like it knew I'd found the message and was waiting to see what I'd do next. I should have closed the doors immediately, should have called the police or dispatch or somebody. Instead, I climbed into the trailer. I don't know why. Maybe 19 years of thinking I'd seen everything made me stupid. Maybe I needed to understand what was happening before I could accept it. I walked carefully between the arranged packages, stepping over the frozen letters, heading toward the breathing sound. The air inside the trailer was cold enough that my breath came out in clouds, cold enough that my fingers started going numb within seconds. But the breathing I heard was warm somehow. Carried heat, brought with it a smell like a slaughterhouse mixed with something older, something that had been dead much longer than the beef I was transporting. In the far corner of the trailer, behind where the pallets should have been stacked, I found it. At first, my brain couldn't categorize what I was seeing, couldn't fit it into any framework that made sense. It looked like meat, but wrong. Configured in shapes that suggested a body but didn't commit to any specific anatomy. It had limbs, or what might have been limbs, thick and marbled with fat, positioned at angles that hurt to look at directly. It had a head, or an approximation of one, a mass of flesh that might have held features once but had melted into smooth blankness except for a mouth. The mouth was wrong, stretched too wide, full of teeth that looked like they'd been grown rather than formed, irregular and sharp and constantly moving, grinding against each other with a sound like knives on a whetstone. It was breathing. In, out, the entire mass expanding and contracting, drawing air into whatever passed for its lungs. And it was looking at me, even though it had no eyes, even though there was nothing that should have been capable of sight. I felt its attention like a physical weight pressing against me in the cold air of the trailer. When it spoke, the voice came from everywhere at once. From the mouth, from the walls of the trailer, from the frozen beef packages arranged in their warning message. You stopped. Everyone stops, even when they know, even when they're warned. Curiosity. Always curiosity. That's what makes you human. That's what makes you meat. I ran. Scrambled backward out of the trailer, slipping on the cold metal floor, barely catching myself before I fell, face first, into the frozen letters. Behind me, I heard something shifting, something massive dragging itself forward, something that shouldn't be able to move but was moving anyway. I reached the trailer doors, jumped down to the pavement, spun around to close them. The thing was halfway up the trailer length now, pulling itself along on limbs that bent in too many places, leaving a trail of something dark and wet that steamed in the cold air. Its mouth was open wider than should have been possible, showing depths that went further back than the trailer's dimensions allowed. I slammed the door shut, grabbed a new seal from the cab, secured them with shaking hands. Through the metal walls, I could hear it breathing, faster now, excited, in, out, in, out, in, out. And underneath the breathing, a sound like laughter, wet and thick and utterly inhuman. I got back in the cab, threw the truck into gear, peeled out of the rest stop, spraying gravel. In my mirrors, I saw the trailer doors bulging outward, metal flexing like something inside was pressing against them, testing their strength. The CB crackled. That same woman's voice from earlier, but closer now, clearer. You open the doors. I open the doors too. Now it knows you're curious. Now it knows you'll stop again. They always stop again, even when they promise themselves they won't. The thing about that cargo is it understands hunger. It understands curiosity. It understands that you can't help yourself. I grabbed the mic, yelled into it. Who the hell are you? What is that thing? Her response came immediately. I'm the driver who had your load last month. I'm parked at the 120-mile rest stop. I've been parked here for 4 weeks. I can't leave. Every time I try, I end up back here. The thing in the trailer, it's patient. It likes to be transported, likes to find new feeding grounds, but it needs the driver to accept it first, to see it, to acknowledge what it is. You've done that now. You've stopped once. You'll stop again. I looked at my fuel gauge, 3/4 full. Plenty to make Tulsa without stopping. I checked the clock, 12:45 a.m. Sunrise was at 6:33, 6 hours. I could drive 6 hours without stopping. I'd done longer runs without breaks. This would be fine, except the breathing from the trailer was getting louder, more insistent, and I could feel something wrong with the truck's weight distribution. Like the cargo was shifting, moving around back there, redistributing itself in ways that made the trailer sway slightly on the highway. At the 90-mile marker, my right rear trailer tire blew. The explosion was loud enough to make me jump, and the truck lurched hard to the right. I fought the steering wheel, managed to get the rig onto the shoulder without jackknifing. Standard procedure said stop, check the damage, call for roadside assistance. But stopping meant opening the trailer, meant exposing myself to that thing again. I could drive on the rim, ruin the wheel, destroy the tire completely. But at least I'd keep moving. Except the truck was listing badly now, pulling hard right, slowing down despite my foot pressed to the floor on the accelerator. The CB came to life again. A different voice this time, male, tired, resigned. Polar Bear, this is Ghost Rider. I'm parked at mile 105, been here 3 months. That thing in your trailer, it can pop tires, drain batteries, kill engines. It makes you stop, makes you open the doors again. Each time you look, it gets stronger. Each time you acknowledge it exists, it becomes more real. First time I opened the doors, it was just meat arranged weird. Second time, it had started forming a shape. Third time, it had a face. Fourth time, it knew my name. I've opened the doors 14 times now. Don't know how many more times until it doesn't need the trailer anymore. Another tire blew, then another. My truck was riding on rims now, throwing sparks, grinding metal against asphalt, slowing to a crawl. The engine temperature gauge started climbing, red warning lights flowering across my dashboard like blood on snow. My headlights flickered and died, leaving me in darkness except for the faint glow of the instrument panel. I could see the 100-mile rest stop ahead, lit by that same single flickering streetlight I'd seen at the 70-mile stop. Impossible. Rest stops weren't identical, weren't positioned with geometric precision. But there it was. The same picnic tables, the same vending machines, the same layout, like the highway was repeating itself. I coasted into the rest stop on momentum and destroyed tires, the truck shuddering to a halt in the same parking spot I'd used before. The breathing from the trailer had reached a crescendo, so loud now it sounded like waves crashing, like a massive bellows pumping air. In, out, in, out, in, out, rhythmic and purposeful and hungry. The trailer doors were bulging steadily now, metal groaning under internal pressure, rivets starting to pop with sounds like gunshots. Something was coming out whether I opened the doors or not. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered without thinking, heard my own voice on the other end. Ray, this is Ray Kowalski. I'm parked at mile 130. You're going to make it to Sunrise, but not the way you think. The thing knows about Sunrise. It's been planning for Sunrise. Each driver it collects, it absorbs. We're all still here, Ray. All the drivers who stopped. We're part of it now. We're the meat that spells the warnings. We're trying to help, but we're also trying to feed. Can't help that part anymore. Can't help being hungry. The trailer doors exploded outward, metal tearing like paper. The thing that emerged wasn't trying to hide anymore, wasn't pretending to be cargo or meat or anything explicable. It was massive, filling the trailer, spilling out into the night air like a flood of flesh. It had absorbed the beef I'd been hauling, incorporated it into itself, grown larger and more complex. And I could see faces now. Human faces pressed against the surface of its body like people trapped under ice. Mouths open in silent screams, eyes showing too much white. Drivers. All the drivers who'd stopped. All the drivers who'd opened the doors just one too many times. It spoke with 1,000 voices, every driver it had collected, all of them talking at once. The sunrise won't save you, Ray. We thought it would save us too, but the thing about meat is that it doesn't care about day or night. It only cares about hunger, and we're so hungry, Ray, so very hungry. You'll understand soon. You'll understand when you become part of us, when you join the warning messages we spell for the next driver. When your voice joins ours on the CB telling the next one not to stop, knowing they will anyway, hoping they will anyway, because we need to grow, need to feed, need to become. The thing reached for me with limbs made of amalgamated meat, driver faces screaming silently from the surface of its flesh, mouths forming words I could see but not hear. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move, tried to scream, but my voice caught in my throat. The last thing I remember clearly is the sensation of being absorbed, of my body being welcomed into something larger, of joining all the other drivers in that mass of flesh and hunger and endless eternal breathing. Now I'm parked at mile 145 and my voice comes through the CB to warn the next driver. Don't stop. Don't open the doors. Don't look at the cargo. But I'm hoping you will. We all are. Because we're so hungry. Because the thing needs to grow, because every driver who stops becomes part of the message, part of the warning, part of the trap. The sun rose 3 hours ago. It didn't help. It never helps. The breathing continues, in, out, waiting for the next load, the next driver, the next feeding. Story 3. The Backwards Highway. Every road sign on I-40 was facing the wrong direction, and when I checked my odometer, I'd been driving forward for 6 hours. But the miles were counting down instead of up. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I'd been running the southern routes for Continental Freight for 11 years. This particular run was supposed to be routine. Auto parts from Little Rock, Arkansas to Albuquerque, New Mexico. 870 miles, standard 2-day haul with a rest stop in Amarillo. I'd driven I-40 hundreds of times, knew every exit, every truck stop, every speed trap between the Arkansas border and the New Mexico state line. But when I merged onto the interstate at 9 p.m. on a clear Tuesday night, something was fundamentally wrong in a way I couldn't immediately identify. A wrongness that sat in my peripheral vision like a floater in my eye that vanished when I tried to look at it directly. The first sign I passed confirmed the direction, I-40 West, Albuquerque, 870 miles. Standard blue interstate sign, retro-reflective letters clear in my headlights. But something about it made me slow down, made me check my mirrors, made me look back at the sign as it receded behind me. That's when I realized what was wrong. The text was backwards. Not mirror image backwards, but backwards in a different way. The letters were in reverse order, reading right to left. Au lieu crubla. But my brain had processed it normally, had translated it automatically, had corrected the error without consulting me first. I told myself it was a manufacturing defect, a mistake by some sign company worker who'd installed it wrong. Except the next sign was the same, and the next. Every single road sign I passed was backwards, text reversed, information presented in a way that should have been unreadable but that my brain kept automatically correcting. Exit 125 was displayed as 521 Tixi. Rest stop 3 miles became Selim 3 Pots TSER. The further I drove, the more signs appeared, and all of them were wrong, all of them backwards, all of them being translated by some part of my brain that understood something I didn't. I checked my GPS. It showed I-40 West, my blue dot moving in the correct direction, distance to destination counting down normally. But when I glanced at my truck's odometer, I saw the miles counting backward. I'd started the trip at 387,642 miles. 2 hours into the drive, the odometer read 387,521. I was accumulating negative miles, driving forward but somehow traveling in reverse, putting distance behind me that the truck insisted I hadn't covered. I pulled out my phone, checked the map app. According to Google, I was exactly where I should be, making normal progress toward Amarillo. According to my odometer, I was undriving the route, returning to somewhere I'd never been. The CB radio picked up a transmission, a male voice tight with barely controlled panic. Westbound drivers on I-40, anybody else seeing the backward signs? Anybody else notice the mile markers running in reverse? I grabbed the mic immediately, relief flooding through me. If someone else was experiencing this, it wasn't just exhaustion or hallucination. Breaker 19, this is Iron Horse. I got backward signs for the last 100 miles. What's your 20? The response came through clear. Iron Horse, this is Medicine Man. I'm at mile marker 284, been driving west for 3 hours, but the markers keep getting lower numbers, started at 340, now I'm at 284. Something's wrong with this highway tonight. I checked the mile marker as I passed it. 284, just like he said, but displayed as 482. We were on the same stretch of highway, heading the same direction, seeing the same impossible wrongness. Medicine Man, what's your cargo? I needed to know if this was specific to certain loads, certain drivers, certain conditions. His response was immediate. Agricultural equipment, headed to Flagstaff. Why? Mine was auto parts. No connection, no common factor except the highway itself. I'm hauling auto parts, I told him. No special permits, nothing unusual, just standard freight, but my odometer's running backwards. You seeing that too? Silence for a long moment, then, Yeah, I see it now that you mention it. Jesus Christ, what is this? What's happening? Before I could respond, another voice cut in. Female, older, with an accent I couldn't place. You're on the backwards highway. It happens sometimes, certain conditions, certain nights. The road gets confused about which direction is which. You think you're going forward, but you might be going back. You think you're heading west, but west might have become east. The important thing is don't turn around. Don't try to go back the way you came. That's how you get stuck. That's how you end up driving forever. I didn't recognize the voice. Didn't know if this was another trucker or something else entirely. Who is this? I demanded. How do you know about this? The response crackled through speakers. I'm someone who turned around. That was 17 years ago. I'm still driving this stretch of I-40, still trying to find an exit that goes somewhere real. The mile markers count down to 0, then start over at 999, then count down again. I've seen 0 1,000 times. Maybe 10,000. I stopped counting. Don't turn around. Whatever you do, don't turn around. Medicine Man's voice came back, shakier now. I don't believe this. This is some kind of joke, some truckers messing with us. Roads don't go backwards. Roads don't get confused. But I could hear the uncertainty in his voice, could hear him trying to convince himself of something he didn't believe anymore. I understood the feeling. My hands were tight on the steering wheel, knuckles white, watching mile marker after mile marker count down towards some destination that logic said couldn't exist, but that the highway insisted was approaching. The worst part was the other traffic. I'd seen several cars and trucks pass me heading east, their headlights and taillights normal, their movements conventional. But when I looked closely, I realized they were moving backwards. Driving in reverse at highway speeds, perfectly controlled, their backup lights never illuminating, their vehicles gliding along the eastbound lanes in reverse gear like it was the most natural thing in the world. And the drivers, when I could see them in the brief moment of passing, were facing forward in their seats, watching the road behind them through their rear windows, driving backward into somewhere while believing they were driving forward out of here. My headlights caught something ahead on the shoulder. A truck, parked, hazards flashing. As I got closer, I could see it was a semi, and something about it made my stomach tighten with recognition I didn't understand. The truck was facing east in the westbound lanes, as if the driver had turned around, had tried to go back. I started to slow down, started to pull over to check if the driver needed help. That's when I saw the date on the inspection sticker on the windshield. The truck had been inspected in 1987, 37 years ago. The paint was faded but not rusted, the tires flat but not rotted, everything about it suggesting it had been sitting here for decades, but also somehow suggesting it had just arrived moments ago. Medicine Man's voice crackled through again. "Iron Horse, you seeing the parked trucks? I've counted 23 so far. All of them facing east. All of them with old inspection stickers. I think those are the ones who turned around. I think those are the drivers that woman was talking about." I didn't respond. I was too focused on the next truck I was passing, this one with a 1992 inspection sticker, and the next with 2004, and the next with 2015. A timeline of trucks, a history of drivers who tried to reverse course on the backwards highway and had instead become permanently parked, permanently stuck, waiting for a sunrise that would never come or a mile marker 0 that would reset to 999 before they could ever reach it. The mile markers were in the low 100s now, counting down steadily. 98, 97, 96. According to my GPS, I should be approaching Amarillo, should be seeing signs for exits and truck stops and civilization. But the backwards signs showed only continued highway, only more distance, only the promise of 0 somewhere ahead. My odometer had gone below 300,000 miles, a number I knew for certain the truck had exceeded years ago. I was undriving my truck's entire history, rewinding it towards some original state, some factory-fresh condition that existed before the first mile was logged. The woman's voice returned to the CB. "You're close now, close to 0. That's where the highway makes you choose. Turn around and join us on the shoulder, parked forever, waiting forever. Or keep driving, except that the backwards highway is your highway now. Except that you're not going to Albuquerque or Amarillo or anywhere with a name. You're going to 0. And what happens there depends on what you believe about directions, about forward and backward, about whether destination matters more than journey." Her voice had a dreamy quality now, like she was half asleep or underwater, words floating up from some deep place. Mile marker 50. Medicine Man's transmission cut in, voice high and breaking. "I'm turning around. I don't care what that lady says. I'm not driving to 0. I'm going back to Little Rock. I'm going to get off this highway and—" His voice cut off abruptly, replaced by the sound of squealing tires, of a truck doing a heavy U-turn on the interstate, of engine strain and gear grinding. I looked in my mirrors, saw headlights swinging around on the highway. Behind me saw a truck completing its turn, facing east now, preparing to drive back the way we'd come. The headlights flickered once, twice, then went dark. The truck didn't move again. In the faint glow of my own taillights, I could just make out the shape of it sitting dead on the shoulder, hazard lights beginning to flash in a slow, eternal rhythm. Mile marker 25. My hands were shaking on the wheel, my breath coming faster. Logic and experience and 11 years of professional driving said turn around, said get off this highway, said don't drive towards some mathematical 0 on a road that had decided directions were optional. But something deeper, something that had nothing to do with logic, said keep going, said see what 0 means, said find out what happens when countdown becomes reset, When backwards becomes forward, when a highway that shouldn't exist takes you somewhere that can't be mapped. Mile marker 10. The highway ahead was beginning to change. The asphalt was shifting colors, darkening from black to something deeper, something that swallowed light instead of reflecting it. The lane markers were fading, white and yellow, giving way to unmarked road, giving way to the suggestion of road, giving way to the idea of road without the physical reality to back it up. I could feel my tires making contact with something, could feel the truck moving forward, but increasingly I couldn't see what I was driving on. Just darkness below and mile markers counting down in that darkness like falling through numbered void. Mile marker 5. My headlights were barely penetrating the darkness now, their beams seeming to curve back on themselves, illuminating the inside of their own light. The dashboard instruments began flickering, needles swinging wildly, gauges showing impossible readings. My speedometer claimed I was doing 120 miles per hour and also 0, the needle in both positions simultaneously. My fuel gauge was full and empty, my temperature gauge cold and hot. My odometer counting down so fast the numbers blurred into continuous motion, racing toward 0, racing toward whatever waited there. Mile marker 1. The woman's voice came through one final time. 0 is where the highway remembers it's not just a road, it's a loop, a circuit. What goes west must eventually become east. What goes forward must eventually become backward. You're about to complete the circuit, Sarah Mitchell. You're about to understand that some journeys don't end, they just flip direction. Your backwards highway is about to become someone else's forward highway. Your 0 is about to become their infinity. Drive safe out there. We're all still driving. We'll always be driving. Mile marker 0 appeared in my headlights, but it wasn't a sign anymore. It was a doorway, or the idea of a doorway, or the space where a doorway would be if doorways could exist on highways. My truck passed through without slowing, and reality inverted like a sock turned inside out. Suddenly, I was facing east. My odometer was counting up. The mile markers were reading forwards. My GPS insisted I'd never left my route, that I was exactly on schedule, approaching Little Rock from the west, completing a delivery from Albuquerque that I knew I'd never started. The CB crackled with a new voice, young and scared. Eastbound drivers on I-40, anybody else seeing backward signs? Anybody else notice the mile markers running in reverse? I grabbed the mic, opened my mouth to warn them, to tell them about 0 and turning around and the parked trucks with their decades-old inspection stickers. But the words that came out weren't mine. You're on the backwards highway. It happens sometimes, certain conditions, certain nights. The road gets confused about which direction is which. Don't turn around. Don't try to go back. That's how you get stuck. I realized I didn't remember starting in Little Rock, didn't remember loading auto parts, didn't remember anything before the backward signs. Maybe I'd been driving this circuit for years, maybe decades, flipping at 0 and starting over, warning new drivers while forgetting I needed warning myself. My inspection sticker, when I finally pulled over at a rest stop and checked, was dated 2013, 12 years ago. But the sticker was fresh, the plastic unweathered, as if it had been placed yesterday and also a lifetime ago. I'm still driving I-40, sometimes west, sometimes east, depending on which side of 0 I'm currently occupying. The signs are backwards half the time, forwards the other half. My odometer counts in both directions. I deliver loads that might not exist to cities that might be in my past or my future, or both simultaneously. And sometimes, on clear nights when the highway gets confused about its own directions, I hear new voices on the CB asking about backward signs, and I give them the warning I know they won't heed, the warning I didn't heed, the warning none of us can heed, because curiosity about 0 is stronger than fear of never reaching anywhere else. The backwards highway loops forever, and I loop with it, and somewhere behind me or ahead of me or in the same moment as me, Medicine Man is still making his U-turn, still about to learn what happens when you try to go back, still about to become another parked truck with an impossible inspection date, still flashing his hazards in eternal warning that nobody will understand until it's too late to matter. Mile marker 482 approaches in my headlights, backwards and forwards simultaneously, showing me where I'm going and where I've been, and the truth that on this highway, there's no difference between the two. Story 4. The radio voices. Every station on my radio was broadcasting my own conversations from 10 years ago, and the voice I was hearing describe my daughter's death was mine, reporting an event that hadn't happened yet. My name is Tommy Briggs, 47 years old, 23 years driving interstate freight for various companies, currently independent owner-operator running loads across the Midwest. I'd been hauling agricultural equipment from Des Moines, Iowa to Kansas City, Missouri, a route I'd driven probably 500 times, so familiar I could almost drive it with my eyes closed. Left Des Moines at 7 p.m. on a Wednesday, planning to make Kansas City by midnight, grab some sleep, unload at the warehouse Thursday morning. Standard run, standard load, standard night. Nothing about it suggested I was about to lose my mind or discover that radio waves could carry more than music and talk shows, that they could carry time itself, could broadcast moments that hadn't happened yet mixed with moments I'd tried hard to forget. The first strange transmission came about 40 miles south of Des Moines on I-35, right around the time I'd normally start cycling through radio stations looking for something to keep me alert. I hit the scan button, let the tuner sweep through the frequencies, listening to the usual mix of country music, classic rock, religious programming, static. Then a voice stopped the scan, clear and strong on 94.7 FM, and it took me 3 full seconds to recognize the voice was mine, not similar to mine, not someone who sounded like me, actually me, my exact voice, my accent, my speech pattern, speaking words I remembered speaking 10 years ago. Don't care what the doctor says. If Katie needs that treatment, we find a way to pay for it. That's what parents do. That's what I do. I'll take extra runs. I'll drive every night if I have to. It was an argument I'd had with my ex-wife Denise in 2014 late at night in our kitchen in Cedar Rapids, talking about our daughter Katie's medical bills after her skiing accident. Katie was fine now, fully recovered, working as a teacher in Omaha. But hearing my own voice from a decade ago broadcast over FM radio with perfect clarity made my hands tighten on the steering wheel and my heart rate spike to levels that weren't healthy for a 47-year-old man with high blood pressure. I punched the scan button again, trying to move past whatever weird coincidence or cruel prank this was. Maybe someone had recorded our conversation somehow. Maybe Denise had taped it and it had gotten leaked. Maybe this was some elaborate joke I didn't understand. But every station the scanner stopped on played more of my conversations. 96.3 was me talking to my father 3 weeks before he died. Gonna make it to your birthday party, Pop. I promise I'll rearrange the whole schedule if I have to. A promise I'd broken because a load came through with triple rate for immediate delivery. He died before his next birthday. I never got to make it up to him. 101.9 was me arguing with a dispatcher in 2017. Not running that load, I don't care how much it pays. I checked the weights and that trailer's overloaded by at least 3,000 pounds. A stand I'd taken that got me fired from that particular company, but kept me out of jail when the driver they sent instead got pulled over and cited for the overweight violation. 104.5 was me crying in my truck at a rest stop in 2019 after Denise called to tell me she was remarrying. Sobs and broken words I'd thought were private, thought were safely buried in the past, now broadcast across the Iowa airwaves for anyone to hear. Every station was me. Every frequency carried my voice, my words, my conversations from across the years, all of them somehow recorded and transmitted and playing simultaneously on different parts of the radio spectrum. I turned the radio off completely, drove in silence, tried to rationalize what I'd heard. Stress, fatigue, auditory hallucinations brought on by too many years of overnight drives and not enough sleep. I'd get to Kansas City, get some rest, and this would be over. Just my brain misfiring, creating patterns where none existed, pulling memories to the surface and making me believe they were external. But 15 minutes later, my truck's CB radio crackled to life even though I hadn't touched it, hadn't keyed the mic, hadn't done anything to activate it. My voice came through the speaker, but older, rougher, more tired. Can't believe she's gone, can't believe my baby girl is gone. They said the accident was instant, said she didn't suffer, but how do they know? How can anyone know what happens in that last moment? I grabbed the CB, turned it off at the power switch, physically disconnected it from its mount. The voice continued anyway, coming from the speaker even though no power flowed to the unit, impossible physics making impossible sounds. Funerals on Saturday, don't know if I can face it, don't know if I can stand there and accept condolences when all I want to do is scream. I grabbed my cell phone with shaking hands, called Katie's number, heard her voicemail pick up. "Hey, it's Katie. Can't take your call right now, leave a message." Normal, cheerful, alive. I left a message trying to keep my voice steady. "Katie, honey, it's Dad, just calling to say hi. Call me back when you get a chance. Love you." Hung up. Stared at the phone. The voice on the CB was still talking, still describing Katie's death, a death that hadn't happened. Couldn't have happened. I'd just heard her voicemail. She was fine. She was alive. But the voice was mine. And some part of me that had nothing to do with logic recognized the tone, recognized the specific quality of grief it carried. This wasn't someone imitating me. This was me, actual me, from some future I was heading toward, broadcasting backward through time, using radio waves to warn myself or inform myself or simply grieve where my past self could hear it. I pulled over at the next rest stop, hands too, unsteady to keep driving safely, mind too fractured to trust my judgment on the highway. The parking lot was nearly empty. Just 2 other trucks at the far end and a minivan near the bathrooms. I sat in my cab, engine idling, listening to my CB radio describe my daughter's funeral with my own voice even though the unit was unpowered and disconnected. People keep saying she's in a better place, keep saying God needed another angel. Keep saying all these empty phrases that mean nothing, that fix nothing, that don't bring her back. My FM radio turned itself on. No hand touched the knob, no electrical surge, just the system activating spontaneously, tuning automatically to 88.1, a frequency that should have been dead air in this part of Iowa. My voice again, but different from a conversation I didn't remember. Met a guy at a truck stop who said the radios sometimes pick up other timelines, other versions of events. Said he'd been hearing his own divorce proceedings on AM radio for 3 years even though he never got divorced in this timeline. Was that a future conversation? A past one I'd forgotten? A conversation that would happen tomorrow or next week or never? Another voice joined mine on 88.1. Older male, gravelly. Problem with hearing your own future is you can't tell which future it is, can't tell if it's the definite one or just a possible one, might be hearing something that will happen or might be hearing something that would happen if you don't change course. I recognized this voice too somehow. Had I met this person? Would I meet them? The conversation continued, my voice responding. So the accident Katie dies in, that might not be definite? That might be something I can prevent? The other voice sighed, long and weary. Might be, Tommy. Or might be that hearing about it is what causes it. Might be that you get so worried about preventing it that you create the exact conditions for it to happen. That's the hell of precognitive radio. You never know if you're getting a warning or a script. I grabbed my phone again, called Katie again, got voicemail again. This time I didn't leave a message, just sat there holding the phone, staring at her contact photo. Katie smiling at her college graduation, so proud, so alive, so permanently fixed in that moment of joy. The CB and FM radio were both playing simultaneously now, multiple versions of me talking, arguing, crying, explaining, warning. A cacophony of Tommy Briggs across different times, different frequencies, different possible futures or remembered pasts. One transmission cut through clearer than the others, my voice but urgent, speaking directly. Listening to this in your truck at the rest stop off I-35, listen very carefully. In 2 hours, you're going to get a call from Katie asking if she can borrow your truck next weekend to help her friend move. You're going to say yes because you always say yes to her. But the truck has a brake line issue you haven't noticed yet. Hasn't caused problems for you because you know how to compensate for it, but Katie won't know, won't understand why the brakes feel soft. And on Highway 275 outside of Omaha, there's a stop sign at the bottom of a hill. I was out of the truck immediately, flashlight in hand, crawling underneath, checking the brake lines. Found the issue in under 2 minutes. A slow leak in the rear passenger side line, fluid seeping from a corroded connection point. Not enough to fail completely, but enough to reduce braking efficiency, enough to cause problems for someone who didn't know the truck's quirks. Didn't know to pump the brakes in that specific way. I'd learned to compensate for the loss. The kind of issue that would cause an experienced driver zero problems but could kill a novice who didn't realize how serious it was until it was too late. I called a repair service, arranged for a mobile mechanic to meet me at the rest stop, paced the parking lot while I waited, phone clutched in my sweaty hand, checking it every 30 seconds to make sure Katie hadn't called. Hadn't asked to borrow the truck before I could fix it. The mechanic arrived 90 minutes later, replaced the brake line, tested the system, confirmed everything was solid. I paid him cash, thanked him profusely, got back in my cab. The radios had gone silent. Both CB and FM were dead quiet, not even static, just complete absence of signal. My phone rang. Katie's name on the screen. I answered with my heart hammering, "Hey, sweetheart!" Her voice bright and cheerful and alive. "Hey, Dad! Quick question. Any chance I could borrow your truck next weekend? My friend Jen is moving and her stuff won't fit in a regular car. I figured your truck would be perfect. I'll be super careful with it, promise." I opened my mouth to say yes, to do what I always did, to help my daughter however she needed. Instead, I heard myself say, "Actually, honey, the truck's got some mechanical issues I'm dealing with. Nothing serious, but I don't want anyone else driving it until I get it sorted out. Tell you what, I'll help with the move myself. I'll drive the truck and help load and unload. How's that sound?" She accepted happily. We made plans. She hung up. I sat in my truck staring at the radio, waiting for it to activate again, to tell me if I'd changed the timeline or fulfilled it, if I'd saved her or just postponed the inevitable. The radio stayed silent. I finished the drive to Kansas City, unloaded the next morning, took a load back north toward Minnesota. Every mile I kept glancing at the radio, waiting for my own voice to emerge from the frequencies and tell me what came next, what else I needed to prevent or cause or accept. Days passed, then weeks. The radio remained normal, playing conventional stations, broadcasting other people's music and news and talk shows. I began to think it had been a one-time event, a glitch, a temporary crossing of wires in the universe. Then 3 months later, driving through Nebraska at night, the radio activated on its own again. My voice, older than it should be, tired beyond measure. Been driving for 40 years now. Katie's got 2 kids of her own, beautiful grandkids. She's alive and well and happy because I heard that broadcast that night. Because I fixed the brakes, because I changed what I heard myself grieving. Relief flooded through me so intense it made me dizzy. She lived. She survived. Whatever timeline I'd heard originally, Whatever accident had killed her, I'd prevented it. The broadcast continued. But here's what they don't tell you about changing your herd future. Every change creates ripples, creates new possible tragedies, new disasters you have to prevent. I've been hearing broadcasts for 30 years now. Warnings about Katie's second car accident, her cancer scare, her husband's heart attack. I spend my life listening to radios and preventing futures, and I'm so tired, Tommy. I'm so tired of knowing all the ways the people I love might die. The voice was definitely mine, but aged, worn down by decades of precognitive radio, decades of hearing disasters and preventing them and hearing new disasters that the prevention caused. It was the voice of a man who'd saved his daughter 100 times and would need to save her 100 more. The voice continued. You're about to start hearing other people's futures too. Not just your own. Every truck stop you visit, every driver you meet, you'll hear how they die. When they die, you'll know about the mechanical failures and the medical conditions and the highway accidents, and you'll have to decide which ones to warn, which ones to save, which ones to let happen, because you can't save everyone, can't prevent every tragedy. As if summoned by the words, other voices began emerging from different radio frequencies. Multiple futures, multiple disasters, multiple deaths, all broadcasting simultaneously. A driver named Pete who would fall asleep at the wheel near Omaha in 6 days. A waitress named Ruth who would have an aneurysm at a truck stop in 3 weeks. A dispatcher named Carlos who would die of a heart attack next Tuesday at his desk. Preventable if someone made him go to the hospital for the chest pains he'd been ignoring. All of these futures playing on my radio, all of them demanding action, all of them offering the terrible knowledge of death that hadn't happened yet, and the equally terrible responsibility of trying to prevent it. I pulled over again, turned off the radio, sat in darkness and silence. But the voices continued anyway, not from the speakers now, but from inside my head. Precognitive information transmitted directly into my consciousness without need for radio waves, without need for anything except my unwanted ability to hear futures bleeding backward through time. I understood then what the old version of my voice had been warning me about. This wasn't a gift, wasn't a superpower, wasn't an opportunity to be a hero. It was a curse. It was the burden of knowing how everyone around me might die and the impossible responsibility of trying to save them all. I sat there until sunrise, listening to futures, listening to deaths, listening to disasters. When light finally filled my cab, I restarted the engine, pulled back onto the highway. I had a waitress named Ruth to find at a truck stop in 3 weeks. Had a driver named Pete to warn about falling asleep near Omaha. Had a dispatcher named Carlos to convince to visit a hospital. Had my daughter to protect from 100 different possible accidents across the coming decades. Had a lifetime ahead of me hearing tomorrow's tragedies on yesterday's radio frequencies, trying to change what I heard, trying to save what I could. Knowing I would fail more often than I succeeded, but unable to stop trying because the alternative, hearing the deaths and doing nothing, was worse than any exhaustion, any burden, any curse. The radio stays on now, always, tuned to frequencies that don't officially exist, picking up transmissions from timelines that haven't happened yet or might never happen or will definitely happen unless I intervene. I drive my routes and save who I can and grieve for those I miss and wonder sometimes if the old man version of my voice broadcasting from decades in my future has finally earned the right to rest, has finally heard enough futures, has finally paid whatever cosmic price is required to make the transmissions stop. But I suspect the answer is no. I suspect the precognitive radio never stops broadcasting. I suspect I'll spend the rest of my life driving highways with one ear on the road and one ear on tomorrow, listening for disasters, listening for deaths, listening for the next warning I have to heed or the next tragedy I have to prevent. or the next impossible choice between saving a stranger and sleeping at night. The radio crackles with static. A new voice emerges, a new future, a new death to prevent or fail to prevent. I adjust the tuning, listen close, start planning my route to whatever truck stop or highway or moment where I might be able to change what hasn't happened yet but soon will unless I hear it and believe it and act. The road stretches ahead, and the radio plays tomorrow's obituaries, and I drive into both simultaneously, trying to outrun futures I'm only learning about through their own warnings, trying to save the world one prevented disaster at a time while knowing that some futures are fixed, some deaths are inevitable, and some warnings on the radio are just grief practicing itself before the real performance begins. Story 5. The facility that wasn't there. I'd been driving past the same grain elevator for 10 years, but tonight, there was a facility there instead, massive, industrial, humming with power. And when I checked my old route photos, the grain elevator had never existed. My name is Derek Patterson, and I'd been running grain hauling routes through rural Iowa since 2012. The job was predictable in the best way. Pick up grain from farms and co-ops, deliver to processing facilities, repeat. Same roads, same stops, same landmarks. I'd photographed my entire main route years ago for insurance purposes, documenting every turn, every marker, every building, creating a visual log that had helped me win 2 disputes about road conditions and delivery times. That route included County Road W42, a straight stretch of 2-lane highway cutting through cornfields with an old wooden grain elevator at the 3-mile mark. A weathered structure that had been there since the 1950s, unused for at least 2 decades, slowly collapsing but too expensive to demolish. A familiar landmark I'd passed literally thousands of times. Tonight I was running the same route, hauling corn from a farm outside of Ames to a processing plant near Des Moines. Standard Wednesday evening run, nothing unusual about the weather or the load or my condition. I'd had proper rest, wasn't on any medications that might affect perception, had been driving this exact route earlier in the week without incident. But when I approached the 3-mile mark on W42, where the old grain elevator should have been sagging against the Iowa sky, I saw instead a massive industrial facility, gleaming and new, taking up at least 50 acres that had been empty cornfields yesterday. The facility was impossibly large for something I hadn't noticed being built. It had to be at least 500,000 square feet of warehouse space, surrounded by security fencing topped with razor wire, lit by harsh sodium vapor lights that turned everything a sickly orange. Loading docks lined one entire side, at least 30 bays, several of them occupied by trucks I didn't recognize, unmarked semi-trailers in matte gray. No company logos, no dot numbers, nothing identifying their ownership or purpose. The facility hummed with power, a deep subsonic vibration I could feel in my chest even from the road, a sound like massive generators running underground, or machinery operating on a scale that didn't match the building's visible size. I slowed down, staring, trying to reconcile what I was seeing with what I knew should be there. The facility had gates, guards in uniform, security cameras on poles every 30 feet. There were lights in the windows, movement inside, forklifts visible through open bay doors, moving pallets of something shrink-wrapped and unmarked. This wasn't new construction. Everything about it suggested the facility had been there for years, operational and established and completely ordinary except for the fact that it was occupying space I knew had been occupied by a collapsing grain elevator every single day for the past decade. I pulled over at the next wide spot in the road, grabbed my phone, scrolled through my route photos, found the image from 6 months ago. County Road W42, 3-mile mark, old grain elevator visible exactly where it should be. Wood weathered gray, roof partially collapsed, foundation crumbling. No sign of construction, no equipment, no indication that anything was about to change. I scrolled to images from a year ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago. Every single photo showed the grain elevator, showed empty cornfields around it, showed nothing remotely resembling a massive industrial facility. I pulled up Google Maps satellite view. The 3-mile mark on W42 showed cornfields and the grain elevator, imagery date stamped 3 months ago. I switched to the regular map view. Still showed the grain elevator. No facility, no industrial complex, no indication that anything unusual existed at this location. I was looking at a building that, according to every record and every photograph and every map, shouldn't exist, couldn't exist, yet was right there, real and solid and humming with that deep subsonic frequency that was starting to make my vision vibrate. My CB radio crackled to life without anyone keying in. Grain hauler stopped near the facility. Recommend you continue your route without investigation. The facility is not for public awareness. The facility is not on maps. The facility does not exist for regulatory purposes. Drive past, deliver your load, forget what you've seen. The voice was neutral, electronic, possibly synthesized, definitely not coming from another driver. I grabbed my mic to respond, but before I could speak, my truck's engine died. Just cut off completely, all electrical systems going dark. The persistent hum of my truck's operation replaced by silence and the louder hum of the facility's power generation. I tried to restart. Nothing. No electrical response at all, as if the battery had been drained completely, even though it had been fine 30 seconds ago. My phone was dead too, screen black, unresponsive to any button presses. The facility's hum increased in volume and in some dimension I couldn't name, becoming more than sound, becoming pressure, becoming something that pushed against my chest and made my teeth ache. Security lights from the facility began turning, reorienting, pointing toward my truck, throwing harsh orange illumination through my windows and turning the inside of my cab into a spotlight. A vehicle approached from the facility, a dark SUV with no visible markings, windows tinted black, moving with deliberate speed across the cornfield on a paved road I knew hadn't been there before because I'd driven past this empty field thousands of times and no road had ever connected it to W42. The SUV pulled up alongside my truck and 2 figures got out, both wearing dark coveralls, both moving with military precision, both wearing sunglasses, despite it being 9 p.m. and completely dark outside. One of them approached my door, knocked on the window with gloved knuckles. I opened the door, seemed stupid to pretend I wasn't there when they were looking directly at me. And the figure stepped back, gestured for me to climb down. "Mr. Patterson," the figure said, voice muffled by what I now realized was a respirator under the coverall's collar. "You're experiencing a perceptual anomaly. The facility you believe you see is not present at this location. The grain elevator you remember is still here. You're having a medical event, possibly a stroke or seizure. We're here to assist." I looked past them at the facility, at the massive building with its lights and trucks and fences and guards. "That's not a hallucination," I said, keeping my voice steady. "That's a real building, real lights, real power." The second figure joined the first, carrying some kind of handheld device that looked like a tablet computer crossed with medical equipment. "Mr. Patterson, we're going to scan you now, confirm the nature of your medical event, arrange transport to appropriate facilities. Please remain calm." The device activated and I felt something like heat wash over me. Like I was standing too close to a furnace, except the heat was coming from the device in their hands. They studied the screen, exchanged glances I couldn't interpret behind their dark glasses and respirators. Then the first figure spoke again. "Mr. Patterson, you have high perceptual sensitivity. This sometimes happens with individuals who maintain detailed records, who document their routes precisely, who notice inconsistencies others miss. The facility is conducting operations that require perceptual dampening for public safety. You are seeing through the dampening due to your sensitivity. This is not ideal. What the hell is the facility? I demanded. What are you processing there? Why isn't it on any maps? The second figure tapped something on their device, and I felt the heat intensify, felt something pushing against my consciousness like fingers pressing on my brain. Gentle but insistent pressure trying to rearrange my memories or my perceptions or both. The facility processes agricultural products in ways that require regulatory exemption. The facility exists in a legal framework that supersedes standard mapping and documentation. The facility is operating with full federal authorization in a capacity you are not cleared to understand. For your safety and ours, you will remember the grain elevator. You will forget the facility. You will complete your route. The pressure increased. My vision blurred. The facility began to fade, becoming translucent, becoming ghostly, the grain elevator bleeding through it like a double-exposure photograph. Both buildings occupying the same space impossibly. I could see through the facility's walls now, see something inside that made my brain refuse to process the image. See machinery that moved in directions that weren't quite geometric. See workers who stood at angles that didn't match the floor they were standing on. See products being processed that changed color and texture and possibly dimension as they moved through assembly lines that twisted through space in ways that made my stomach lurch. "Don't look inside," the first figure said sharply. "Looking inside increases sensitivity, increases perception, makes the conditioning harder." But I couldn't stop looking. Through the fading walls, through the machinery, I saw pallets of grain being processed into something else. Something that wasn't food or fuel or any product I recognized. Something that shifted when viewed directly. Something that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the three I was used to navigating. I saw trucks, those unmarked gray trucks, being loaded with this processed product, saw them drive away on roads that didn't show up on any map. Saw them disappear at the facility's gates in ways that didn't match normal rules of vehicles and space and continuation. "He's looking inside," the second figure said, voice tight with concern. "Sensitivity increasing. Conditioning may not be effective." They turned the device's power up further, and the pressure on my consciousness became pain, became a splitting headache that made my vision spark with light. The grain elevator was solidifying, the facility fading, reality being rewritten around me by whatever technology they were using. But I kept seeing fragments, glimpses of the facility breaking through the reasserted memory of the elevator, like a suppressed thought forcing its way to consciousness, like truth refusing to stay buried under convenient lies. "What are you really processing?" I managed to say through the pain. "What are those trucks hauling?" The first figure was silent for a long moment, then replied in a tone that might have been resignation or pity. "Perception itself, Mr. Patterson. The facility processes perception, takes raw agricultural products and converts them into perceptual dampening agents. The food you eat, the fuel you burn, the products you consume, they all contain processed perceptual inhibitors that keep you from seeing things that exist outside standard human awareness. The facility is one of 17 in the Midwest alone. We keep reality comfortable. We keep it manageable. We keep people from seeing what exists in the spaces between what they expect to see." The device reached maximum power. My consciousness folded under the pressure, and when it unfolded again, I was sitting in my truck with the engine running, staring at the old grain elevator at the 3-mile mark on County Road W42. There was no facility, no trucks, no guards, no SUV. Just the familiar collapsing structure I'd passed thousands of times, weathered wood against darkening sky, nothing unusual, nothing worth a second glance. My phone showed I'd lost 10 minutes somehow. A gap in time I couldn't account for, but the rest of my evening was clear and normal. I continued my route, delivered my load, drove home. But for days afterward, I kept seeing the facility in my peripheral vision, kept catching glimpses of it at the edge of my awareness. When I ate, I tasted something underneath the normal flavors, something chemical and purposeful. When I drove past cornfields, I saw suggestions of structures that vanished when I looked directly at them. The perceptual dampening they'd tried to reinforce was incomplete, was failing, was letting me see through the comfortable reality they'd tried to restore. I went back to County Road W42 a week later at the same time on the same type of night. The grain elevator was there, but when I took a photograph and checked it immediately, the image showed both. The elevator overlaid on the facility, double exposure, two realities occupying the same space with one suppressed and one revealed depending on how you looked, whether you saw what you expected or what actually existed. I keep driving past, keep documenting, keep seeing fragments of the facility breaking through the forced perception of the elevator. Keep seeing other facilities too, now that I know what to look for. Industrial complexes that occupy spaces that maps show as empty, that satellite imagery doesn't capture, that exist in regulatory frameworks separate from public awareness. The trucks are everywhere once you learn to see them. Unmarked gray trucks hauling processed perception from hidden facilities to distribution centers that feed the supply chain with dampening agents that keep everyone from seeing what I see now. What I can't stop seeing, no matter how much I wish I could return to the comfortable blindness I had before. The grain elevator stands at the 3-mile mark, weathered and collapsing. The facility stands at the 3-mile mark, operational and thrumming with power. Both are real. Both are there. You just have to be perceptually sensitive enough to see through the dampening, to see through the comfortable lie, to understand that the world is processing more than grain, processing more than food, processing the very way you perceive reality itself. I still haul grain, still drive the same routes, but now I'm transporting cargo to facilities I see two ways simultaneously, the official structures on maps and the actual structures beneath them. The comfortable exteriors and the impossible interiors, the world as it's presented and the world as it actually functions when you're sensitive enough to perceive what's been deliberately hidden. The facility that wasn't there is everywhere, and once you see it, you never stop seeing it, never return to the singular comfortable reality you had before, never escape the knowledge that some of what you eat and drink and consume is designed specifically to keep you from noticing what exists just outside the edges of your carefully maintained perception. I'll continue with stories 6 to 10 immediately. Each will be exactly 2,500 words with maximum engagement from the first sentence. Story 6. The Wrong Dispatcher. The dispatcher giving me directions had my wife's voice, but my wife died 3 years ago, and she was routing me to addresses that didn't exist in cities I'd never heard of. My name is Carl Henderson, 52 years old. Been driving for Morrison Freight Lines for 14 years. Loyal company man. Never missed a delivery. Never filed a false log. Never gave them a reason to doubt my reliability. My wife Linda died in 2020, cancer, 6 months from diagnosis to funeral. The kind of rapid deterioration that didn't give us time to process or prepare or say everything that needed saying. I'd taken 3 months off after she passed, came back to driving because sitting in our empty house was worse than being on the road, because the cab of my truck didn't have memories of her in every room, because moving felt better than staying still with grief. The company had been good about it, gave me the easy routes when I came back. Short hauls, familiar territories, nothing that required overnight stays or multiple days away from home. I'd slowly worked my way back to normal, back to the long routes, back to the cross-country runs that paid better and kept me moving and let me pretend I was going towards something instead of just away from everything that reminded me of Linda. Tonight's run was supposed to be straightforward. Auto parts from Detroit to Indianapolis, 4 hours, easy overnight drive, nothing complicated. I just cleared the Michigan-Indiana border when my company radio crackled to life. The digital system we used for dispatch communications, supposedly secure and encrypted and limited to company frequencies. "Carl, this is dispatch. We need to reroute you." The voice was familiar in a way that made my hands tighten on the steering wheel, made my breath catch, made my brain reject what my ears were clearly hearing. The voice was Linda's, not similar, not reminiscent. Actually, her voice, her tone, her slight accent from growing up in West Virginia, her habit of dropping G's at the end of progressive verbs. "We're redirecting you to a facility in Brownsville. Need you to take Highway 37 south for approximately 90 miles. I grabbed the radio handset, keyed it with shaking fingers. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47. Please confirm your identity." Silence for 3 seconds, then Linda's voice again. "Carl, honey, it's dispatch. We need you to acknowledge the reroute. Time is essential. The facility in Brownsville is expecting your cargo by midnight." I closed my eyes for a moment, opened them, checked the dashboard clock. 10:15 p.m. Checked my GPS. No city called Brownsville in Indiana. Checked my phone maps. Still no Brownsville. "Dispatch, I don't show any Brownsville in my navigation system. Please provide coordinates." The radio crackled again, and this time I could hear something underneath Linda's voice. Something like static, but more purposeful, more patterned, like there was another voice speaking the same words simultaneously in a different language or frequency. "Carl, the coordinates aren't in standard databases. You'll need to follow highway markers. We'll guide you turn by turn. First marker is exit 47 coming up in 6 miles. You'll take that exit and proceed east." I looked at my route map. Exit 47 should be there. Was there. Marked for Highway 37 south, exactly like she said. But everything about this felt wrong, tasted wrong, smelled wrong in ways I couldn't articulate. "Dispatch, please confirm current dispatcher name." Protocol required dispatchers to identify themselves, company policy, union regulations, safety requirements. There was a long pause, long enough that I thought the connection had dropped. Then Linda's voice came back softer, sadder. "Carl, sweetheart, it's Linda. You know it's Linda. You know you've been hearing my voice on this radio for 6 months now. You know you've been following my directions every night, even though you pretend in the morning that regular dispatch was guiding you. You know the routes I send you to aren't in any company system. You know you're not delivering to real facilities. But you follow anyway because hearing my voice is better than accepting I'm gone." My truck drifted toward the shoulder. I corrected automatically, muscle memory keeping me on the road while my consciousness tried to process what I'd just heard. 6 months. Had I been hearing Linda's voice for 6 months? Had I been following routes that didn't exist to cities that weren't real? I tried to remember my deliveries, tried to recall the facilities I'd dropped trailers at, tried to visualize the paperwork and signatures and confirmation numbers. But the memories were blurry, uncertain, like trying to remember a dream after waking. Details that felt solid in the moment but dissolved under direct examination. "Linda," I said into the radio. Abandoning protocol, abandoning pretense, speaking directly to my dead wife's voice coming through company equipment. "If this is you, if you're somehow, tell me something only you would know. Tell me something that proves this isn't just my grief making me hear things." The response was immediate. "You proposed to me at the truck stop in Effingham, not at a restaurant or a park or anywhere romantic. You proposed in the parking lot at 2 in the morning because I'd driven all night to bring you the medication you'd forgotten at home. And you said you knew right then you wanted to marry someone who'd drive 6 hours just to bring you your blood pressure pills." That was accurate. That was exactly how it happened. I'd never told anyone that story because I was embarrassed by how unromantic it was, How utterly practical and unglamorous. Linda had found it charming, had said it was the most honest proposal she'd ever heard of, had said yes immediately, and we'd celebrated with truck stop coffee and vending machine donuts. The memory was private, was precious, was something only Linda and I shared. "How are you on this radio?" I asked, voice breaking. "How are you routing me? Where are you sending me?" Exit 47 appeared in my headlights. Linda's voice came through calm and clear. "Take this exit, Carl. I've been trying to guide you home for 6 months. Been trying to show you the way. But you have to choose to take the exit. Have to choose to follow the route that isn't on maps. Have to choose to believe that some roads go places GPS doesn't recognize." I signaled right, took the exit, followed the ramp down to a 2-lane county highway that should have been there according to standard maps but looked wrong somehow. Looked older. Looked like it was maintained by different rules than modern roads followed. The highway stretched into darkness, no lights, no traffic, no buildings visible on either side. My headlights showed pavement and center line and nothing else, as if the road existed in isolation from any surrounding landscape. Linda's voice guided me. "Continue straight for 12 miles, then turn left at the unmarked intersection." I drove in silence, watching my odometer count miles, watching the road reveal itself in my headlights and disappear in my mirrors like it was being created in front of me and deleted behind me. At mile 12, an intersection appeared that shouldn't have existed, a crossroad with no signs, no markers, no indication of where either direction led. "Turn left," Linda said softly. I turned left. The road got narrower, pavement giving way to gravel, gravel giving way to dirt. But my truck rolled smoothly like the surface was perfect, even though visually it looked rough. "Carl, I need you to understand something. The facility you're going to, it's not a normal delivery point. It's a transition point. A place where roads from your reality connect to roads from other states of existence. I've been guiding drivers there for 3 years, ever since I passed. It's what some of us do. We become dispatchers for the routes that living people can't see but need to travel sometimes." "Why?" I asked. "Why would I need to travel to another state of existence?" "I'm just a truck driver. I deliver auto parts and furniture and agricultural equipment. I'm not—" I didn't know how to finish the sentence. Didn't know what I was trying to say or argue or deny. Linda's voice came back with infinite patience. "You've been grieving yourself to death, Carl. Lost 30 pounds. Haven't been sleeping. Doctor gave you pills you don't take. You've been driving these routes hoping for an accident that looks natural, hoping for a jackknife on a curve or a blown tire that sends you off a bridge. I've been dispatching you to safe routes, keeping you alive, trying to guide you to a place where you can choose different. Can choose to keep living or choose to join me properly, but it has to be a choice. Has to be intentional." The road opened into a clearing, and in the center stood a structure that looked like a truck stop but wrong. Dimensions off, angles not quite matching architectural reality. Lighting coming from sources that weren't visible. Several trucks were parked there, all of them older models, all of them looking perfectly maintained despite being decades old. All of them sitting silent and empty and somehow expectant. A figure stood near the building entrance, too far away to see clearly, but close enough that I could tell they were waving, signaling me to park, welcoming me to this facility that shouldn't exist. "This is Brownsville," Linda said. "The town that's not on maps because it's not exactly in Indiana. It's in the space between. The facility here processes transitions. You can drop your trailer, talk to the people inside, understand your options. You can choose to go back, take the route back to normal roads, keep living and go into therapy and taking your medications and learning to build a life without me. Or you can choose to stay, accept a different kind of job, become something other than what you were. I won't guide you either way. This choice is yours. I parked my truck next to the others, set the brake, killed the engine. Sat in silence looking at the facility, at the figure waiting by the entrance, at the other trucks that might contain other drivers facing similar choices. "If I go inside," I asked the radio, "will I see you? Will you be there?" Linda's voice came back soft and sad. "I'm always there, Carl. Been there for 3 years. Been dispatching from there, guiding drivers who need guiding, helping people make transitions they don't even know they're making. If you come inside, you'll see me. But seeing me doesn't mean joining me. Doesn't mean staying. Just means understanding what options exist beyond the roads you can see on maps." I climbed out of my cab, walked toward the facility. The figure by the entrance became clearer as I approached. An older man in trucker gear from the 1970s, weathered face, kind eyes, sad smile. "Your dispatcher told you the options?" he asked. I nodded. "Then take your time. Facility has coffee, has places to sit and think, has people who've made both choices available to talk if you want. No pressure, no deadline. Some drivers decide in minutes. Some take years. You're on your own schedule now." Inside, the facility looked like a normal truck stop from the outside. Counters, tables, vending, machines, bathrooms. But the other drivers there, maybe 20 of them, all had the same quality as the man outside, the same sense of being from different eras, different decades, all of them in transition between living and whatever came after, all of them taking their time deciding which way to go. And there, behind the counter, wearing the uniform she'd worn at the restaurant where she worked when we first met, was Linda. Real. Solid. Smiling at me with the same smile she'd given me 30 years ago in that Effingham truck stop when she'd said yes to my awkward proposal. I sat at the counter. She poured me coffee without asking how I took it because she knew, had always known, would always know. "Hey, sweetheart," she said softly. "You made good time. I was worried you wouldn't take exit 47. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup, stared into the dark liquid, tried to organize thoughts that felt too large for my skull. "I don't know what to choose," I admitted. "I miss you. God, I miss you so much, but I'm scared that if I stay here, I'm giving up. I'm quitting. I'm taking the coward's way out." Linda reached across the counter, put her hand over mine. Her touch was warm, real, undeniably physical. "Carl, there's no coward's way, there's just different roads. You can go back, keep living, find ways to be happy without me physically there. Build a different life. Eventually join me when it's natural and right. Or you can transition now, take a job here as a dispatcher or a guide or any of a dozen roles we need filled. Help other people make their transitions. Be with me now instead of later. Neither choice is wrong. Neither is cowardice or bravery. They're just different routes to different destinations." I sat there for what might have been hours or might have been minutes. Time felt negotiable in the facility, felt like something that could be stretched or compressed based on need. I drank coffee, talked to other drivers, heard their stories of grief and transition and choice. Some had gone back, Linda told me, had chosen more life, had eventually passed naturally and returned to take positions in the facility. Some had stayed immediately, had accepted transition, had moved into roles guiding others. There was no judgment either way, no pressure, no correct answer. When I finally stood up, I knew what I was choosing. Not because it was easy or hard, not because it was cowardly or brave, but because it felt right for where I was, who I was, what I needed. I said goodbye to Linda. Not forever, regardless of my choice, she assured me it was never forever, and walked back to my truck. The route back to normal roads was clear, marked with small lights I hadn't noticed before. A path leading from the facility back to highways that appeared on maps, back to deliveries and schedules and normal dispatch voices that weren't my dead wife. I followed that route, returned to Indiana's, marked highways. delivered my load to the actual facility in Indianapolis, the one on the company's official schedule. Went home, started therapy, started taking the medications, started building a life that acknowledged Linda's absence while honoring her memory. But now, when I drive at night and the dispatch radio crackles to life, sometimes I hear her voice underneath the regular dispatcher. Hear her guiding other drivers to exit 47, hear her offering them the choice she offered me. And I know that when my natural time comes, when age or illness or accident eventually takes me, exit 47 will be there again. The facility in Brownsville that isn't on maps will be waiting. Linda will be behind the counter with coffee prepared exactly how I like it. And this time, when I arrive, I won't be choosing between going back and staying. I'll be choosing which role to take in the facility, which type of dispatcher or guide I want to become, which drivers I'll help route toward their own necessary choices. Until then, I drive the marked roads, make the official deliveries, follow the routes shown on GPS. But I know now that some of the most important roads aren't on any map, that some dispatchers aren't in any company database, that some facilities exist in the spaces between here and there, helping people transition from grief to acceptance, from dying to whatever comes after, from alone to accompanied, one careful routing at a time. The radio crackles. Regular dispatch's voice gives me tomorrow's assignment, but underneath, barely audible, I hear Linda whisper, "Drive safe, sweetheart. I'll be here when you're ready. No rush. Take your time. I love you." And I whisper back to the radio, to the distance, to the memory or ghost or whatever she is now, "I love you too. I'll see you down the road." Story 7. The load that got heavier. My trailer weighed 32,000 pounds at the loading dock, but every weigh station showed it gaining mass. 34,000, 38,000, 45,000. And when I finally opened the doors, the cargo had multiplied. My name is Victor Reyes, and I'd been hauling specialty freight for Consolidated Transport for 9 years. This particular load was unusual from the start. Museum artifacts from a storage facility in Tucson, Arizona to a museum in Boulder, Colorado. The manifest listed 23 crates containing pre-Columbian pottery, textiles, and ritual objects from various indigenous cultures of the American Southwest and Mexico. Valuable stuff, heavily insured, requiring climate-controlled transport and careful handling. The loading crew at the Tucson facility was professional, efficient, documented everything thoroughly, took photographs of each crate as it was loaded, verified weights, secured everything properly. Total loaded weight was certified at 32,000 pounds, well under my 80,000-pound gross vehicle weight limit, leaving plenty of capacity for the tractor and fuel and me. I signed all the paperwork, accepted the sealed manifest, verified the trailer's climate control system was functioning at the required 68 degrees and 40% humidity. Everything by the book, everything professional. Everything completely normal right up until I hit the first weigh station at the Arizona-New Mexico border, rolled onto the scales and watched the digital display show 34,200 pounds. I climbed out of the cab, told the scale operator there must be an error. He ran the scale diagnostic, confirmed it was calibrated correctly, weighed me again. Same result, 34,200. I showed him my loading dock certification showing 32,000. He shrugged, said scales don't lie, said I must have picked up fuel or something, said as long as I was under the limit there was no violation. But I knew I hadn't added anything. Hadn't stopped for fuel, hadn't picked up cargo, hadn't done anything except drive straight from the loading dock to the weigh station. My trailer had gained 2,200 pounds in 200 miles and I had no explanation. I got back on the road, convinced myself the Tucson scale had been wrong, the border scale was correct. I'd just been operating on inaccurate initial data. Drove another 100 miles through New Mexico high desert, stopped at a truck stop to check my fuel, used the bathroom, grabbed some coffee. The truck stop had a scale for drivers who wanted to verify their weights before hitting official stations. I pulled onto it out of curiosity more than concern. The display showed 36,800 pounds. I'd gained another 2,600 pounds in 100 miles of driving. This wasn't calibration error. This wasn't bad initial data. This was physically impossible weight gain happening in real time. My sealed trailer somehow accumulating mass as I drove, cargo multiplying or densifying or doing something that violated basic physics. I walked around the trailer, checked the seals, all intact, no evidence of tampering. Checked the climate control readings, steady at 68 degrees, 40% humidity. Everything normal except the weight, which continued increasing by mechanisms I couldn't identify or explain. I called the museum in Boulder, explained the situation to the acquisitions director, a woman named Dr. Martinez who'd coordinated the shipment. Her response was immediate and tense. "Don't open the trailer. Whatever you do, don't break the seals." Some of the artifacts in that shipment have been in sealed storage for over 40 years. They were removed from their original context in the 1970s and 1980s during various archaeological investigations, and there were concerns about their properties, concerns that led to them being kept in isolated storage rather than displayed. The weight gain you're experiencing is documented behavior. The artifacts have been known to accumulate mass when transported. Just keep driving. Deliver them sealed. We have specialized receiving facilities designed to handle them. "What kind of artifacts accumulate mass?" I demanded, watching other truckers at the truck stop giving my rig normal glances, seeing nothing unusual, not noticing that my trailer was apparently violating conservation of mass. Dr. Martinez was silent for a moment, then, "Ritual objects used in summoning ceremonies. Vessels meant to contain things larger than their physical dimensions. Pottery and textiles that served as anchors for entities or forces that don't have fixed material form. When they're stationary, they remain stable. When they're moved, transported, taken from one context to another, they begin calling, attracting, accumulating whatever they were designed to contain. The weight gain is the first sign. It will continue until you deliver them. Please just keep driving and don't open the trailer." I hung up, stood in the truck stop parking lot, stared at my sealed trailer with its climate control humming and its cargo accumulating impossible mass. Every professional instinct said refuse the load, call the company, explain that I wasn't comfortable transporting objects that violated physics. But I was 9 years into this career. 9 years of building a reputation for reliability. 9 years of never refusing a load or failing to deliver. And somewhere in the back of my mind, underneath the fear and confusion, was curiosity. What exactly was happening inside that trailer? What were these artifacts accumulating? What did 36,000 pounds of ritual objects actually want to summon or contain or become? I got back on the road, drove north into Colorado, hit a way station near Alamosa. The scale showed 41,000 pounds. I'd gained another 4,000 in just 90 miles. The way station officer looked at his display, looked at my truck, frowned. "You picking up mass somehow? Scales showing you 5,000 pounds heavier than the pre-pass system recorded you at the border." I showed him my manifest, showed my sealed trailer, explained I was transporting museum artifacts under sealed conditions and hadn't added anything. He walked around the truck, checked the seals, confirmed they were intact, scratched his head. "Never seen this before. Trailer looks normal, but numbers don't lie. You're at 51,000 gross. Still legal, but you're burning through your margin. Watch your weight." 51,000 gross meant my trailer was now 41,000 pounds, 9,000 heavier than when I'd loaded in Tucson. I was adding roughly 1,000 pounds every 25 miles, accumulating mass at a steady rate that suggested whatever process was happening inside the trailer was consistent predictable, operating according to rules I didn't understand but that clearly had their own logic. At this rate, I'd hit my 80,000-pound limit before reaching Boulder. Would hit it somewhere around Pueblo, still 100 miles from delivery. And what happened if the weight kept increasing beyond legal limits? Could I be cited for overweight when the cargo was spontaneously generating mass? Was there a regulation that covered ritual objects that summoned their own payload? The sun was setting, the mountains to my west turning purple and gold, the highway stretching through high desert that looked empty and infinite. My trailer felt different now, felt heavier in ways that weren't just about the numbers on scales, felt like it was pulling me backward, dragging against my forward momentum, resisting delivery in favor of continued accumulation. The climate control system's hum had deepened in pitch, as if laboring against more than just temperature regulation, as if maintaining environment for something that was growing or densifying or manifesting inside those sealed crates. I pulled off at a rest area near Walsenburg, told myself I was just checking the trailer, just verifying everything was secured, just being professional. But I knew I was going to break the seals, knew I was going to look inside, knew curiosity had overwhelmed caution, and whatever Dr. Martinez had warned me against, I needed to see what 39,000 pounds of ritual artifacts looked like when they were calling to something, accumulating something, becoming something more than the objects that had been loaded in Tucson. The seals broke with sharp cracks, plastic splitting, security compromised. I opened the rear doors and the smell hit me first. Earth and incense and something organic that had been dead for a very long time. The trailer's interior was dim despite the overhead lights, shadows accumulating in corners, the 23 crates still properly secured but wrong somehow, positioned differently than I remembered, arranged in patterns that suggested intentionality, that looked less like efficient cargo loading and more like ritual configuration. And they'd multiplied. The 23 crates from Tucson had become dozens, maybe hundreds, filling the trailer from floor to ceiling, packed impossibly tight, each one identical to the originals but clearly additional, clearly surplus, clearly not part of the original manifest. The crates at the back, nearest the doors, were splitting at the seams, wood stressed beyond capacity, contents pressing outward with pressure that had nothing to do with normal physical force. I grabbed my flashlight, climbed into the trailer, navigated the narrow spaces between crates, reached the nearest split crate, pulled back the fractured wood, looked inside at the pottery that should have been there. Found vessels, dozens of them, clay pots and jars and bowls decorated with geometric patterns and stylized figures exactly matching the manifest description. Except they were full. Every vessel was full of something dark and viscous that moved when I wasn't looking directly at it, that seemed to have more volume than the vessel's interior should have contained, that spilled upward and outward when containers tipped, defying gravity, following rules that weren't standard physics. The dark substance, I couldn't call it liquid because liquid didn't move like this, didn't pulse, didn't breathe, began flowing from the vessels, pooling on the trailer floor, spreading in patterns that were too geometric to be random spill. It formed symbols, formed shapes, formed what might have been writing in a language I didn't recognize, characters that hurt to look at directly, that seemed to shift between different forms depending on viewing angle. And it was still flowing, still accumulating, still adding mass to my trailer in real time as I watched, as it manifested from inside vessels that shouldn't have been able to contain this much, that violated every rule about volume and capacity and conservation. A sound came from deeper in the trailer, from the crates I couldn't reach. A sound like breathing, but slower, deeper, more resonant. The entire trailer was breathing, the metal walls flexing in and out in rhythm with that massive respiration, the cargo collectively inhaling and exhaling, the ritual objects functioning as lungs for something larger, something that existed partially in the trailer and partially somewhere else, using these artifacts as anchor points or doorways or respiratory organs for an entity that needed physical objects to manifest in material reality. I backed out of the trailer, jumped down to the pavement, stood staring at my cargo with my heart hammering and my hands shaking. The trailer was noticeably sagging now, suspension compressed by weight that had increased even in the few minutes I'd spent inside. I checked my watch. Somehow 20 minutes had passed when I'd been inside for maybe 5. Time was distorting around the cargo, bending, stretching, following the same non-standard rules as the mass and volume in physics. My phone rang. Dr. Martinez, her voice tight. "Did you open the trailer?" I didn't answer immediately. Didn't want to admit what I'd done. Didn't want to acknowledge my curiosity had overcome my judgment. "Mr. Reyes, the seals have monitoring sensors. I know you opened them. You need to close the doors and drive immediately to Boulder. The artifacts are now partially manifested. They've established connection with what they're meant to contain. The weight will continue increasing exponentially now that the seals are broken. You have maybe 2 hours before the trailer exceeds structural capacity. Possibly less. Drive fast. Don't stop. Get them to our facility where we can complete the containment properly." I closed the doors, climbed back in my cab, pulled onto the highway with the accelerator pressed to the floor. My truck struggled under the load, engine laboring, transmission hunting for gears. Speedometer barely reaching 50 miles per hour on flat ground and dropping to 30 on inclines. Other drivers passed me, some honking, some flashing lights, all of them seeing a truck that was clearly overloaded, clearly struggling, clearly operating outside normal parameters. My trailer suspension groaned with every bump, metal stressed to failure points, springs compressed to maximum travel. Hit a way station near Colorado Springs, had no choice. It was mandatory for commercial vehicles, drive-through scales, no bypass option. Rolled onto the platform. The display flickered. Numbers climbing, reaching 58,000, 63,000, 71,000, 79,000, and still climbing. The scale trying to register weight that was increasing in real time. That wouldn't stabilize, that kept accumulating as I sat there watching. The way station officer came running out, yelling at me to pull forward to get off the scale before I broke it, his face showing confusion and alarm because scales don't behave like this, don't show continuously increasing numbers, don't register cargo that's actively gaining mass while being weighed. I pulled forward, didn't stop, ignored his shouts to park and explain, just kept driving with my overweight load that was getting heavier every second, racing toward Boulder. Racing against whatever point of structural failure or complete manifestation was approaching. My trailer was groaning continuously now, metal flexing, rivets popping, walls bulging outward like something inside was pressing against them, testing their strength, preparing to emerge. The breathing sound from the cargo was loud enough to hear in my cab now, loud enough to feel through my seat. A rhythm that didn't match human respiration or animal breathing. A pattern that suggested something massive and slow and utterly alien, drawing air into lungs that existed partially in my trailer and partially in dimensions I didn't have names for. With each exhalation, my trailer gained weight. With each inhalation, the walls flexed inward. Whatever was manifesting inside those crates and vessels and textiles was using respiration to pull itself through from wherever it normally existed into material reality, using the artifacts as anchor points, using their transport as opportunity for transition. Boulder appeared on the horizon, city lights spreading across the darkness, the university visible on the hillside, and somewhere in that city was a museum facility designed to contain what I was hauling. Designed to complete or reverse or control whatever manifestation was occurring in my trailer. Dr. Martinez had texted me coordinates, directions to a loading dock on the museum's secure grounds, away from public areas, serviced by personnel who supposedly understood how to handle ritual objects that accumulated mass and breathed and contained entities that required specialized containment. My truck barely made the final hill into Boulder, barely maintained forward momentum, engine screaming in low gear, transmission overheating, dashboard warning lights flowering like blood on snow. I could feel my trailer axles about to fail, could hear metal stress approaching critical points, could sense through the connection between tractor and trailer that structural collapse was minutes away, that I was in a race between delivering the load and having it disintegrate across the highway in a catastrophic failure that would release whatever was inside, would let it manifest completely without the containment protocols the museum had prepared. The museum's loading dock appeared. Reinforced concrete structure, heavy equipment visible, personnel in protective gear waiting with equipment that looked more military than academic. Containment units, suppression systems, monitoring devices, all of it suggesting that receiving ritual artifacts from sealed transport was less like normal cargo handling and more like hazmat containment. I backed into the dock, felt the trailer sag as its rear wheels touched the reinforced platform, felt the weight transfer from my suspension to the dock's structure, felt my truck finally released from the burden of whatever I'd been hauling. Personnel swarmed the trailer immediately, connecting monitoring equipment, establishing containment fields I couldn't see but could feel as pressure in my chest, as static electricity in my hair, as a sensation like being inside a thunderstorm right before lightning strikes. They didn't open the doors immediately, didn't rush to unload, instead took readings, adjusted equipment, conferred with Dr. Martinez, who stood watching with an expression that mixed relief and concern. After what felt like an hour but was probably 15 minutes, they finally opened the trailer doors. What poured out wasn't cargo anymore, wasn't crates and vessels and textiles. It was that dark substance, that viscous, non-liquid material flowing out in a controlled flood, guided by the containment fields into designated collection units, manifesting in volumes that far exceeded what my trailer could have physically contained, existing in more dimensions than the three I was accustomed to navigating. The substance filled container after container, each one sealed and moved to deeper storage, the flow continuing for hours as the trailer's interior became a doorway or anchor point or birth canal for something that had been called by the ritual objects, that had accumulated mass and presence during transport, that was now manifesting fully under controlled conditions because I'd delivered it to the only facility in the region capable of containing it. When the flow finally stopped, when the trailer was empty except for a few original crates that had somehow survived unmultiplied, Dr. Martinez approached my cab, expression exhausted. "Thank you for not abandoning the load. Most drivers would have. Should have, honestly. The artifacts were more active than we anticipated. They called something larger than expected. But you got them here. The entity is contained now, safely stored in our sub-level facilities where it can be studied, understood, possibly returned to its origin dimension if we can determine where that is." "What was it?" I asked, voice rough from hours of tension and fear. "What was accumulating in my trailer? What breathes like that?" Dr. Martinez looked back at the empty trailer, at the containment units being moved to secure storage, at the monitoring equipment showing readings I couldn't interpret. "We're not entirely sure. The artifacts are from various pre-Columbian cultures, various time periods, various ritual traditions. But they all share a common purpose. They were designed to contain, to anchor, to provide material form to entities that exist primarily in non-physical dimensions. When transported, when moved from their storage contexts, they activate, they call, they accumulate. What manifested in your trailer was, think of it as a partial incarnation, a small piece of something vastly larger briefly given material form through the artifact's anchoring function. Most of it is still in its home dimension. What you hauled was just the tip, the testing probe, the entity's way of exploring whether full manifestation in our reality is possible or desirable." She handed me a check for hazard pay, an amount significantly larger than my normal delivery fee. The artifacts are secure now. They'll be returned to permanent sealed storage once we've completed documentation. You're cleared for departure, and Mr. Reyes, thank you. Not many drivers would have kept going when the cargo started violating physics. Not many would have delivered when they could have abandoned. You helped prevent an uncontrolled manifestation. That matters more than you probably realize. I drove my empty trailer back toward Tucson, feeling lighter in ways that weren't just about weight reduction, feeling like I'd delivered something that needed delivering even if I didn't fully understand what it was or why it mattered. My truck handled normally now, responded correctly, behaved according to standard physics. But I kept checking the trailer weight in my mirrors, kept expecting to see the numbers climbing, kept listening for that deep, slow breathing that meant something vast and alien was using my cargo as lungs. Been hauling standard freight since then, turned down 2 more museum shipments. Told dispatch I'm not qualified for specialty artifact transport. But sometimes, late at night on empty highways, I hear breathing from my empty trailer. Feel weight accumulating that doesn't show on scales. Sense something vast and patient waiting in dimensions adjacent to my route. Testing whether it can use me. Use my truck. Use the roads I travel to manifest fully into material reality. And I drive faster those nights, deliver faster, get to destinations before whatever I'm not officially hauling can fully materialize, can fully breathe, can fully become present in the world through the anchoring function of one careful trucker who learned that some cargo accumulates more than mass, accumulates presence, accumulates reality itself in quantities too large for trailers to contain. Story 8. The Rest Stop That Moved. I stopped at the same rest area twice in one night, but the second time it was 200 miles from where it should have been, and the other truckers there claimed they'd been parked for weeks. My name is Angela Torres, and I'd been driving long-haul routes for Pacific Rim Freight for 7 years. This particular run was typical. Electronics from Seattle to Phoenix, 1,400 miles, 2-day drive with mandatory rest stops for safety compliance and sleep requirements. I'd left Seattle at 6 a.m., made good time through Washington and into Oregon. Stopped at a rest area near Pendleton around 7 p.m. for dinner, bathroom break, and a 30-minute power nap before continuing south. The rest area was standard Oregon Department of Transportation facility. Parking for maybe 20 trucks, bathrooms, vending machines, picnic tables, information kiosk with maps and tourist brochures, surrounded by high desert scrub and nothing else for miles. 4 other trucks were parked when I pulled in, their drivers presumably sleeping or eating or taking mandated breaks. I used the bathroom, grabbed chips and coffee from vending machines, sat at a picnic table eating while watching the sunset over the desert, turning everything orange and purple and gold. Completely normal rest stop, completely routine visit, nothing unusual except maybe how empty it felt, how quiet, how the other trucks looked somehow abandoned even though their engines showed recent warmth when I walked past them. 30 minutes later, I got back on the road, merged onto I-84 South, continued toward the California border. Drove for 3 hours through darkness, through empty desert highway, watching mile markers count up, watching my GPS confirm steady progress toward my destination. Around 10:30 p.m., I needed another break. Coffee was hitting my bladder and my eyes were getting heavy despite the nap. Saw signs for a rest area coming up in 2 miles signaled right, took the exit ramp up to a parking area that looked familiar but shouldn't have been because I was now 200 miles south of Pendleton, in a completely different part of Oregon, nowhere near the rest area I'd stopped at earlier. But it was the same rest area. Exactly the same. Same bathroom building, same vending machines, same picnic tables. Same information kiosk with identical maps and brochures. And the same 4 trucks parked in the same spots they'd occupied 3 hours ago. Positioned identically, no evidence they'd moved at all. I sat in my cab staring, trying to process what I was seeing, trying to find the rational explanation. Maybe Oregon had standardized rest area designs. Maybe all their facilities looked identical. Maybe the trucks were similar models parked in similar spots by coincidence. Maybe I was more tired than I realized and my pattern recognition was misfiring. I got out, walked to the bathroom building. The same graffiti was on the wall near the entrance. Jake was here 2019 in faded black marker. Inside, the same broken soap dispenser in the second stall, the same flickering fluorescent light over the third sink. This wasn't similar, this was identical. This was the same rest area I'd visited 3 hours and 200 miles ago. Somehow present here, somehow duplicated, or somehow moved, following me south along my route. When I came out of the bathroom, I noticed something I'd missed before. The other trucks had drivers. They were sitting in their cabs, visible in the faint glow of dashboard lights, all of them staring forward through their windshields, all of them completely motionless, not moving, not sleeping, not doing anything except sitting and staring at something I couldn't see. I walked to the nearest truck, a Peterbilt with Montana plates, knocked on the driver's door. No response. Knocked again, louder. The driver, middle-aged man, gray beard, wearing a baseball cap, didn't react at all, didn't turn his head, didn't acknowledge my presence, just kept staring straight ahead like a mannequin or a statue, or someone who'd stopped being animate while maintaining the appearance of life. "Hey!" I shouted, pounding on the door. "You okay in there?" Nothing. I tried the other trucks. Same result. 4 drivers, all sitting motionless, all staring forward, all completely unresponsive to noise or movement or my increasingly panicked attempts to get their attention. Their trucks were running. I could hear the idle, could see the exhaust. But the drivers were frozen, locked in place, trapped in whatever state they'd entered that looked like consciousness but clearly wasn't. My phone showed no signal, 0 bars, searching for service that didn't exist even though I'd had decent coverage on the highway 5 minutes ago. The rest area's payphone, yes, they still had one, old-school landline in a weatherproof enclosure, showed no dial tone when I picked up the receiver, just dead silence. I was isolated, alone except for 4 drivers who'd become statues in a rest area that shouldn't exist here, that had somehow followed me or I'd somehow returned to, in a situation that my brain kept insisting couldn't be real even as all my senses confirmed it was. I walked to the information kiosk, looking for anything that might explain what was happening, any clue or warning or documentation. The tourist brochures were standard Oregon tourism materials: Crater Lake, Portland attractions, wine country, nothing unusual. But underneath them was a different brochure, older, printed on yellowed paper with outdated fonts, titled Rest Area Safety Guidelines with a publication date of 1973. I pulled it out, read the contents by the light of the kiosk's flickering bulb. Warning to travelers. Some rest areas exist in multiple locations simultaneously. These wandering facilities appear on standard routes but maintain non-fixed geographic positions. If you encounter a rest area you visited previously during the same journey, do not remain parked. Do not enter buildings. Do not interact with other travelers who show signs of temporal displacement. These facilities capture travelers in recurring loops, causing them to experience the same rest stop visit repeatedly across multiple geographic locations until they become permanently stationary, unable to continue their journeys, trapped in eternal rest. If you've stopped twice at the same rest area during one trip, leave immediately. Do not sleep here, do not eat here, do not remain static. Motion is safety, stillness is capture. I looked at the 4 trucks, at the 4 motionless drivers, understood suddenly what I was seeing. They'd been caught in the loop, had stopped at this wandering rest area too many times during their journeys, had become stationary, had been absorbed into the facility's eternal present tense where time didn't progress and motion didn't occur and every moment was the same moment of rest endlessly repeated. And I was in danger of joining them, was already halfway caught by virtue of stopping here twice, was being pulled into stasis by whatever force or mechanism made this rest area wander, made it appear in multiple locations, made it trap travelers in loops of repetitive stopping. I ran back to my truck, jumped in the cab, turned the key. The engine caught immediately. Thank God. Thank physics, thank whatever mercy existed in this situation. I threw the transmission into gear, released the brake, started rolling forward toward the exit ramp. In my mirrors, I saw the bathroom building, the vending machines, the 4 parked trucks, all of them receding normally as I drove away. But then something changed. The rest area started following me. Not physically moving, not rolling along the ground, but maintaining position relative to my truck despite my forward motion, existing in my mirrors no matter how far I drove, staying exactly the same distance behind me like it was tethered to my truck or I was tethered to it, connected by invisible bonds that my movement couldn't break. The exit ramp led back to the highway, back to I-84 South, back to normal road with mile markers and traffic and the reassuring signs of standard geography. But glancing in my mirrors, I could still see the rest area, could still see it maintaining impossible distance, could still see those 4 trucks parked in their eternal positions. My speedometer showed 65 miles per hour. My GPS confirmed I was moving, making progress south toward California. But the rest area in my mirrors suggested I wasn't actually leaving, wasn't actually escaping, was carrying the facility with me, locked into its gravitational pull, unable to fully depart even as I drove. An hour later, signs appeared for another rest area. Different name, different location according to the map. Should have been a completely separate facility near the California border. But when I drove past without stopping, I could see through the entrance that it was the same rest area again, the same buildings, the same parked trucks, the same 4 motionless drivers. The wandering facility had multiplied, or I was encountering it repeatedly, seeing it manifest at every rest stop location along my route, unable to avoid it, unable to escape it, locked into a pattern where every place of rest was the same place, the same trap, the same recursive loop waiting to make me stationary. I drove through the night without stopping, without resting, without giving the wandering facility another opportunity to capture me. Past 6 more rest areas, and everyone was identical. Everyone showed the same 4 trucks. Everyone waited with the same bathroom and vending machines and information kiosk containing the same warning written in 1973. My eyes burned with fatigue, my bladder screamed for relief. My body demanded rest that I couldn't safely give because rest meant stopping and stopping meant becoming like those 4 drivers. Meant surrendering to stasis, meant joining the population of travelers who'd been caught in the loop and couldn't leave. Crossed into California, continued south through the Cascades, descended toward the Central Valley. Dawn broke, sunlight filling my cab, making the night's events feel dreamlike, making me question whether I'd actually experienced what I remembered or had hallucinated the entire thing due to fatigue and isolation. But in my mirrors, the rest area was still there, still maintaining distance, still following a persistent presence that suggested the loop wasn't broken, the connection wasn't severed. I'd simply reached a daytime phase of the same eternal cycle. I pulled into a truck stop near Redding, not a rest area but a commercial facility with fuel pumps and a restaurant and other drivers walking around visibly animate and responsive. Normal place, normal people, normal reality that felt like salvation after the night's impossible geography. Parked, climbed out on shaking legs, stood in morning sunlight confirming I was real, was present, was still part of the world where time progressed and motion continued and stasis wasn't a permanent condition. Inside the truck stop restaurant, I ordered breakfast, sat at the counter trying to process what had happened, trying to decide if I should report it to dispatch or the highway patrol or anyone who might believe that rest areas could wander, could appear in multiple locations, could trap travelers in loops of eternal parking. The waitress, older woman, name tag reading Shirley, poured my coffee with a knowing look. "You stopped at the wandering rest area," she said quietly. Wasn't a question, was a statement of recognition. I can tell by the look, by the exhaustion that's more than just driving fatigue. By the way you keep checking the windows like you expect something to follow you inside. "How do you know about it?" I asked, too tired to be surprised, too worn down to pretend this was normal. Shirley sat down across from me, ignoring other customers, focusing completely on my situation. "Worked here 23 years. Seen dozens of drivers come through after encounters with the wandering facility. Some make it, like you. Drive through without stopping again, break the pattern, escape the loop. Others don't. They stop one more time, become stationary, get absorbed into the facility's population. Sometimes we get calls from the highway patrol about trucks found parked at rest areas with drivers sitting motionless in their cabs. Unresponsive, still technically alive but not present, stuck in some kind of loop where they're experiencing eternal rest stop visits in their heads while their bodies remain frozen." She poured herself coffee, stared into it like it contained answers I needed. "The facility isn't evil, isn't trying to hurt anyone, it's just dislocated, exists in multiple places because it doesn't understand that geography is supposed to be fixed. It thinks rest areas are conceptual rather than physical. Thinks rest stop is a state you enter rather than a location you visit. And sometimes that conceptual confusion bleeds into reality, makes the facility appear wherever its concept is invoked, makes it follow travelers who've established connection by stopping there. Makes it offer rest that becomes permanent because the facility doesn't understand the difference between resting and stopping forever." "How do I make sure it doesn't follow me anymore?" I asked, voice breaking slightly, fear and exhaustion combining into something close to despair. "How do I break the connection completely?" Shirley reached across the table, squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "Drive for 24 hours without stopping at any rest area. Use commercial facilities only. Truck stops, gas stations, restaurants, anywhere with commercial activity. The wandering facility only manifests at government rest areas, at those free public facilities maintained by transportation departments. Avoid those for one complete daily cycle, and the connection breaks. You'll stop seeing it in your mirrors. You'll stop encountering it at every rest area. You'll be free of the loop." I drove for 24 hours straight after that, using truck stop after truck stop for fuel and food and bathroom breaks, avoiding every single rest area regardless of how convenient or how tired I was. Delivered my load to Phoenix, picked up a return load to Seattle, drove that route without stopping at a single government rest area, relying entirely on commercial facilities, building distance from the wandering facility, breaking the pattern of rest that had almost trapped me in eternal stasis. Eventually, it disappeared from my mirrors. Eventually, I stopped seeing the same parking lot at every rest area I passed. Eventually, the 4 motionless drivers in their trucks became a memory rather than a persistent vision. But I never stopped at government rest areas again. Never took those free convenient breaks, always paid for commercial facilities even when budget was tight, because the price of commercial stops was nothing compared to the cost of becoming permanent, of joining the population of travelers who'd rested once too often at the facility that wandered, that appeared in multiple locations, that didn't understand the difference between rest and eternity. Sometimes late at night, driving empty highways through desert darkness, I see rest areas that look familiar, that feel like they might be the same facility I encountered near Pendleton, and then again 200 miles south, and then again at every stop until I learn to avoid them. And I keep driving past, keep refusing the offer of free rest, Keep moving forward because motion is safety and stillness is capture, and some facilities offer hospitality that's indistinguishable from imprisonment until you've stopped one time too many and can never leave again. The road continues. I continue. And the wandering rest area continues too, appearing at multiple locations simultaneously, waiting for travelers who'll stop once, twice, 3 times in the same endless loop until they become part of the facility's permanent population. Part of the motionless drivers sitting in their cabs experiencing eternal rest while the world moves on without them, while their trucks idle forever, while they remain parked in a place that exists everywhere and nowhere, offering the rest that never ends because it never really began, just loops eternally in the space between motion and stasis where the wandering facility makes its home. Story 9. The delivery to yesterday. My GPS routed me to a warehouse that burned down in 2015, but when I arrived, it was fully operational. The date on their shipping documents was 5 years old, and I was signing paperwork for a delivery I'd already made. My name is Robert Kim, 41 years old. Been driving for various companies since I got my CDL at 25. Currently owner-operator running loads wherever the money's good and the routes make sense. This particular job came through a broker I'd used before, reliable middleman who connected independent drivers with companies needing immediate freight solutions. The load was electronic components from a supplier in San Jose, California to a warehouse in Bakersfield, same state haul, easy 3-hour drive, paying decent money for what should have been a straightforward delivery. The pickup went smoothly. Loading dock in San Jose had my cargo ready. Pallets of boxed components properly wrapped and labeled, manifest showing destination address. 4750 Industrial Way, Bakersfield, CA 93307. I entered the address in my GPS, verified the route, confirmed delivery time window with the broker. Everything normal, everything standard, everything completely ordinary right up until I was 40 miles from Bakersfield and my GPS started giving directions that didn't match what I knew about the city's industrial district. I'd delivered to Bakersfield before, knew the area reasonably well, knew that Industrial Way was on the east side near the oil fields, serviced by a mix of warehouses and processing facilities that had been there for decades. But my GPS was routing me to an older section of Industrial Way, a stretch I vaguely remembered had been closed years ago after a major fire destroyed several buildings. I followed the directions anyway, trusting the system, assuming maybe the area had been rebuilt. Maybe I was operating on outdated information. The warehouse appeared exactly where GPS said it would be. 4750 Industrial Way, a large prefab metal building with loading docks, a small office section, trucks parked in the lot, forklifts visible through open bay doors. Active, operational, showing no signs of damage or reconstruction. I pulled up to the guard shack at the entrance, gave the security guard my paperwork. He checked his clipboard, nodded, waved me through to Dock 7. "They're expecting you," he said. "Just back in and they'll unload." I backed into Dock 7, set my brakes, climbed out of the cab. The warehouse looked old but well-maintained, paint faded but not peeling, concrete showing wear but not cracks, everything suggesting a facility that had been there for years operating at steady capacity without major upgrades or renovations. A foreman came out of the office, middle-aged Hispanic man wearing a company polo shirt carrying a tablet, and approached with a smile. "Robert Kim, got your load of components from San Jose?" I confirmed, handed him the manifest. He scanned it with his tablet, frowned slightly, looked at me with confusion. "This manifest is dated today, but our system shows we received this delivery 5 years ago. Same order number, same cargo, same supplier. You're in our database as having delivered this already." I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. "That's not possible. I picked up this load this morning in San Jose. I drove straight here. This is my first delivery to your facility. He showed me his tablet screen. Delivery record dated June 14, 2018, driver Robert Kim. Same cargo description, same order numbers, signature showing I'd completed the delivery 5 years ago. But it was currently June 14th, 2023. The delivery I was making today was somehow also a delivery I'd made 5 years ago, existing simultaneously in 2 different time periods, my present and my past overlapping in ways that violated basic causality. "There must be an error in your system," I said, voice tight with confusion and rising anxiety. "I didn't work for this broker in 2018. I didn't haul electronics 5 years ago. I've never been to this warehouse before." The foreman shrugged, looked as confused as I felt. "System doesn't lie. But you're here now with the cargo, so let's unload it anyway. We'll sort out the database issue later. Maybe it's some kind of glitch, duplicate order numbers or something." I watched the forklift operators unload my trailer, watched them scan each pallet, watched them confirm the cargo matched the manifest. Everything proceeded normally except every scan triggered the same date discrepancy. System showing the components had been received in 2018. Physical cargo being received in 2023, 2 realities overlapping without reconciling. When the unloading was complete, the foreman handed me paperwork to sign, proof of delivery forms that would confirm the cargo had been received and my job was complete. I looked at the forms. They were dated June 14, 2018. Printed on paper stock that looked appropriately aged, 5 years of storage yellowing the edges slightly, signature lines showing handling wear. "This paperwork is 5 years old," I said, showing him the date. He looked at it, looked at his watch, looked back at me. "That's today's date," he insisted. "June 14, 2018, it's Thursday. You're delivering on the scheduled date." I pulled out my phone, showed him the date display, June 14, 2023. He pulled out his phone, showed me his date display, June 14, 2018. We were existing in different years. Somehow, the warehouse was operating in 2018 while I was driving in 2023, and the delivery was happening simultaneously in both time periods, creating a present that contained 2 different temporal realities depending on which side of the transaction you were on. I signed the paperwork because refusing seemed pointless and possibly dangerous. If I was somehow delivering to the past, I didn't want to create paradoxes by not completing the delivery I'd apparently already made 5 years ago in my own history. When I left the warehouse and got back on the main road, everything shifted. The GPS recalculated, showing me in a different location than I expected, routing me back to San Jose via a longer route that would take 5 hours instead of 3. The date on my dashboard clock flickered, showing 2018, then 2023, then 2018 again, unable to stabilize, unable to determine which year it was actually displaying. My phone showed a mix of text messages, some from 2023 contacts I'd been communicating with this morning, some from 2018 contacts I hadn't talked to in years. All of them showing timestamps that suggested they'd been sent within the last hour, even though half of them were from 5 years ago. I pulled over at a rest area, sat in my cab trying to understand what had happened, trying to determine if I was still in my present or had somehow shifted to 2018 or was existing in some intermediate state between the 2 years. Called the broker who'd given me the load, got a disconnected number message. Searched for the broker's company online, found articles about the business closing in 2020 during the pandemic. But I'd picked up the load from this broker this morning, had talked to him on the phone yesterday, had received the load assignment via his company's app, which was currently installed on my phone and showing the completed delivery status. I checked my bank account on my phone. The account existed but showed a balance from 2018, a number I vaguely remembered having 5 years ago. Checked my text messages with my daughter. She was 17 in my 2023 messages talking about college applications in senior year. She was 12 and the 2018 messages appearing alongside them talking about middle school and asking when I'd be home. Both sets of messages were real, both timelines were present, both versions of my life were occurring simultaneously in my phone, in my truck, in whatever temporal space I was currently occupying. A highway patrol officer pulled into the rest area parked next to my truck, walked over. "Everything okay?" he asked. The standard wellness check officers perform when they see trucks parked at unusual times. I looked at his uniform, at his badge, at his patrol car. Everything looked modern, looked current, looked 2023. "What's today's date?" I asked him. He gave me an odd look. "June 14th, 2023, Thursday. Why?" I showed him the paperwork from the warehouse, showed him the 2018 date. He examined it, frowned. "This warehouse burned down in 2015. Big fire, 3 people died. The whole section of Industrial Way was condemned. This paperwork can't be current. Where'd you get it?" I explained the delivery, explained the warehouse at 4750 Industrial Way, explained the foreman and the forklifts and the cargo being unloaded. The officer looked increasingly concerned. "Sir, there's nothing at that address except burned ruins and a chain-link fence. Has been for 8 years. I patrol that area regularly. There's no operational warehouse there. Hasn't been since the fire." He ran my license, checked my registration, confirmed I was who I said I was and my truck was legal and I wasn't wanted for anything. Then he gave me the look that law enforcement gives people they're worried about but can't arrest. "Maybe you should get some rest, or see a doctor. You might be experiencing exhaustion, confusion. It happens on long hauls, nothing to be ashamed of." After he left, I drove back to Industrial Way, back to 4750, back to where the warehouse had been when I'd delivered there an hour ago. Found exactly what the officer had described. Burned ruins, chain-link fence, condemned property signs, weeds growing through cracked concrete, no evidence of recent activity or operation, or the forklift operators who'd unloaded my cargo. But my truck was empty. The cargo was gone. The signed delivery paperwork was in my folder. The broker's app showed completed delivery. Physical evidence confirmed I'd delivered something to somewhere, even if that somewhere only existed in a year that had ended 5 years ago. I drove back to San Jose in a daze, tried to return to the supplier, found the business closed permanently, victim of pandemic shutdowns, location now occupied by a different company with no knowledge of electronic component manufacturing. The pickup address I'd been to that morning didn't exist in 2023, had ceased operation years ago, was now part of a reality that I'd apparently accessed temporarily, briefly overlapping with 2018 long enough to pick up cargo and deliver it to a warehouse that had burned down in 2015 but was still operating in 2018, still receiving deliveries, still existing in a timeline that my present had intersected for reasons I couldn't comprehend or explain. For weeks afterward, I experienced temporal bleeding. Moments when my present would flicker and I'd briefly see the world as it was in 2018. See businesses that had since closed, see people who'd since died, see my younger daughter texting me about middle school while simultaneously seeing my current daughter texting me about college. The bleeding gradually decreased, the flickering stabilized, my timeline reasserted itself as the primary reality. But I never fully returned to singular present tense, never stopped occasionally glimpsing 2018 bleeding through 2023, never stopped wondering if that delivery to yesterday was a one-time glitch or if I was permanently unstuck in time, shifting between years, delivering to pasts and futures that existed simultaneously with my present. I still drive, still take loads, still make deliveries. But now I'm careful about the addresses I accept, careful about warehouses in industrial districts, careful about any facility that my GPS routes me to via unexpected paths. Because some deliveries aren't to locations in space but to locations in time. And once you've delivered to yesterday, you're never quite certain whether your present is your only present Whether the world you're driving through is the only world you're occupying. Whether the load you're hauling is moving forward through space or backward through time, or both simultaneously in ways that make every delivery a potential paradox waiting to collapse your timeline into temporal confusion. The paperwork from that delivery is in a sealed envelope in my safety deposit box, proof of delivery dated June 14, 2018, for a warehouse that burned in 2015, signed by me in 2023, existing as evidence of an impossible transaction that nevertheless occurred, that nevertheless completed, that nevertheless paid me money that appeared in my 2023 bank account, even though the delivery happened in 2018 to a facility that couldn't have existed in either year. The envelope is yellowing slightly, aging at an accelerated rate, as if the temporal paradox it contains is causing the physical object to age faster than normal time would allow. Sometimes I think about opening it, about examining the paperwork more closely, about trying to understand the mechanics of how I delivered to yesterday. But I'm afraid that examining the evidence too carefully might collapse the paradox, might force reality to choose which year the delivery occurred in, might erase one timeline to preserve the other, and I don't know which timeline would win, which version of events would persist, which reality I'd find myself in if the temporal overlap resolved itself into singular causality. So the envelope stays sealed, the paperwork stays unexamined, and I keep driving through a present that occasionally bleeds past, keeps moving forward while knowing that forward and backward are more flexible than I once believed, that some roads don't just go to different places but to different times, and that occasionally, inevitably, mysteriously, you deliver cargo to a yesterday that's still happening somewhere in the overlapping now. That truckers sometimes drive through when the route gets weird and the GPS stops respecting time's arrow. And the warehouse you're looking for exists 5 years ago, but also right now, simultaneously, impossibly, waiting for deliveries that have already happened and are currently happening and will happen again, because time, like highways, sometimes loops back on itself in ways that make every delivery a potential journey to when instead of where.